The only thing better than this matchup is beans on toast. Camelot Kings, the Gilded Gladiators, right here, right now.
Don't you laugh at me with that disappointment. Don't you shake your head at me on that one. That was also a bad one. I literally walked into the booth on that and I said, I want a set where I could just say beans on toast for whatever reason. And that's the one it landed on. Anyways, it's the Camelot Kings and the Gilded Gladiators. I'm J-Mac. That's Trelly Relly joining me here on the desk. We jump into our final set here in week number 2 of the SPL. We can take a look at the schedule to see everything that you've missed out on so far this weekend. We've only had one set that hasn't gone the full distance, or I should say, once it hasn't gone beyond, just the 3 games initially. As Highland Ravens and Gilded Gladiators are only 3-0, everything else 3-1s for our weekend. We'll see if that trend continues with the 3-1s here into our final match, Camelot Kings and Gilded Gladiators, to round things out after a 3-1 for the Styx Ferrymen in their victory just earlier on. And then we can even take a look at the standings to see how things kind of pan out after our first couple of weeks of play. Oni Warriors on top of their division, but right behind them is the Highland Ravens and then potentially the Camelot Kings, depending on how things shake up in this matchup inside of our division. Opposite side, a little more clear-cut. Atlantis Leviathans 3-1, right behind them, Styx Ferrymen at a 2-0. Jade Dragons and Eldritch Hounds then follow in on the opposite there for the Order side division. But here we move in, and Camelot Kings, I think this is a team where the discussion going kind of to the end of Phase 1 and then into Phase number 2 was what's going to change here with the Camelot Kings. They make a roster change, well, maybe kind of forced into a roster change at the very least. They pick up Quig for their team, and it was a little shaky at the very beginning of it. We kind of looked and said, okay, they're kind of doing all right, not all quite there just yet, but their first match of the week, or their first match of the phase last weekend, they look really strong. Now moving up here into the Gladiators, this is the Camelot Kings team that a lot of players have their eyes on.
Yeah, I would say so. This is a team that we've been waiting for those adaptations. We've been waiting for a bit of growing pains, like losing a shot caller like Genetics can't be easy to try and replace. However, I think as we've seen more and more of this squad, they have been looking a lot cleaner. They've been tightening up some of those loose ends that we were worried about. BMT has been a driving force behind this squad. I mean, that man always looks pretty insane in the mid lane, which is, it's nice to have someone to lean on in that instance, right? When you know that you got to adapt to a different play style and just have someone that you know is going to go even or even pop off in most matchups. So I think that has been a good look for the Camelot Kings. And of course, leaning on Jarcorrr is always going to be easy, right? One of the most dominant ADCs that we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, I think you're right to say. I mean, the transition from Jarcorrr from solo lane to support for a very small stint, and then ADC to kind of round out the end of last year, and even playing ADC a little bit before that whenever he first jumped up back into the SPL for some time being. It's really solidified himself as one of those powerhouse ADC players, and we got a moment to sit down with Jarcorrr just to see what he was kind of thinking about this matchup.
We have a really slow game 1 against the Ravens. I think we are still getting used to things and how the team dynamic and everything is gonna work around. But after game 1, I think we find our way in the rest of the games, even though doesn't matter the kill count or what is happening. I think it felt like we were in control of what we wanted to do, and we just played the game our way, and it felt really good. Playing against the Glads, I think they have a really good games against the Dragons last week. I think right now, the meta is entering in a really jungle base, so I think probably Kyrmi. I think Kyrmi gets on a good start. He feels himself, so you see him trying to make plays and trying to be proactive. So I will say Kyrmi is probably the guy to look out. So I think it's gonna be a really interesting match. I think they are still probably almost in the same boat of us, just still finding out how they want to play the game as a team. They made a change recently, and I think that things take time. So I think it's gonna be a really interesting game against them.
And I think that echoes a lot of what we were kind of talking about on the waiting room regarding the Gilded Gladiators team. Was it feels like it's a team really centered around Kyrmi. He is kind of the pinnacle for the Gladiators team, and so a lot of these other opponents that have to go up against are always going to be keeping their eyes out for what does Kyrmi want to play, what can they maybe take away from him, and kind of see how that goes. So I'll be interested to see the draft side for the Camelot Kings, but the opposite end of that coin now comes over to the Gilded Gladiators, and what can they do to now maybe diversify their win conditions? Because it really has felt like the pacing of their games has been dictated by the man on your screen right here, Kyrmi.
I tend to agree, and I think Jarcorrr definitely smart in analyzing that. But with that being said, I already talked about how I believe BMT is just the picture of consistency. If you want to talk about the picture of inconsistency, it seems like it's Snoopy, right? There's games where he is absolutely nuts, and I'm like, okay, we're seeing that peak Snoopy again. He's getting lane pressure. He's looking for solo kills. And there's games where it's just the complete opposite, right? So I think trying to find some way to keep Snoopy on those gods that he likes to, as well as just keep him intact with, you know, that level of play we know he can play to, is going to be very important for the Gilded Gladiators.
He is staring into my soul right now. He's saying, I dare you to say something right now. Okay, look at that. He stopped talking. He's serious about it now.
And I'm just kidding. Snoopy's the best player I've ever seen, and he's the GOAT. I would never say anything bad about him.
That's the man who leads the Snoop troop right there. But talking about Snoopy and BMT, we can take a look at their god pools and kind of see how the two compare to each other. Because when we look at a lot of different players out there, for some roles you see a lot of parity, at least amongst their shared gods. And you see that reflected here. 10 gods between the two of them of their 18 and 14. Though some of the ones that BMT is playing are still a little bit more out of pocket, maybe more so than what Snoopy has gone with. The Vulcan, we don't really see that a whole lot anymore. Hera also kind of sticks out more towards along with him and Darda's comparison. But then you also have Snoopy doing similar things out here. I mean, nobody's really playing Anubis. Nobody is playing Eshell besides Snoopy, and I think Paul maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little back and forth here. Maybe just because we haven't had a chance to see Raijin go into BMT's hands, but I know that's also a pick that BMT does like to go towards.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of contention just for some of these top mid lane picks. As we said, both have the ability to go to some of these assassins as well. Just because they haven't shown all of them doesn't mean that, you know, those gods don't exist in the back of the god pools here for BMT and Snoopy. But this is what I'm talking about. Even if Snoopy gets some of these key gods, it's not always that consistent performance that the Gilded Gladiators necessarily need. And whether that be because of pressure along the map, whether that be because Kyrmi, you know, gets behind early, or maybe Awesome Jake doesn't rotate out in time, all of that, you know, isn't really what I'm concerned about. You have to look towards your mid laner to say, hey, are you remaining relatively even to BMT, right? Are you both, you know, matching that farm? Are you able to match that pressure? And also, rotations are very important in this current meta. How many mid laners have we seen just initiate ganks on their own, right, without junglers entirely? So I'm going to be keeping my eye on that mid lane matchup. I think it's going to be very important, almost more so than the junglers, which is usually what's driving the game.
Yeah, well, let's see how the picks and bans shake out as we jump into game number 1, P's and B's, with the Gladiators and the Kings. Gladiators taking that first pick spot. And kind of talking a little bit more about Snoopy, you look at his past 6 games that he has played. It's only been Raijin and Huang, just alternating games between those two. Hasn't been able to find too much success on the Raijin really since that Dragon set. Was able to find a win on it and a loss during that matchup there. Though the loss at the very end of that set was legitimately just a one-team fight, turned the entire tide of the game, kind of a moment for him. But as we jump into at least the first half of the bans here, Yamoja and Hades by the Gilded Gladiators, Camelot Kings took away Olorun and Athena. And I think, to me, the Athena is probably the newest addition to the ban column, and rightfully so. The players that have been performing well on this god look unstoppable, so maybe the Camelot Kings, banking on the fact that Jake could probably also play this pick very well and that it's a good pick, maybe no surprise now that we are starting to see this god make its way into the ban column.
It's just so hard to mess up. You know what I mean? Like, dash taunt is always, at any point in the game, is going to be a fantastic engage. You don't have to worry about how we're going to start this fight. You don't have to worry about engage. You can get global presence essentially whenever you want, which is very impactful. You don't have to worry about, hey, there's a fight going on the other side of the map and I'm not there. Athena just completely alleviates that pressure. So I think focusing out that Athena when you're not first pick, definitely a smart look. The Camelot Kings have done their homework, but the Gilded Gladiators have done something interesting where they're taking away some of these supports. They're trying to focus out Quig, but they haven't banned away any of those top tier, you know, ADC or assassins that have been so prominent in the meta. I'm curious if they value that Chernobog pick as highly as some of these other squads, and if so, is that something Stuart wants, or give it to Snoopy, who has played it in the mid lane in the past? So to see if that's something they're looking to grab here, because if they are, that'll be the time to take it.
Amaterasu, the final ban for the Camelot Kings, along with Ganesha from the Gilded Gladiators. A lot of options open to both of these teams. What do the Gladiators put the most pressure and priority towards? It will be the Chernobog, which primarily has landed himself in the ban column. You look at the ban rate versus the pick rate, almost double or more than double, I should say. But in the last set alone, we had 4 games in a row where CycloneSpin was able to pilot this pick, found a win on 3 of those. Now let's see if that same luck can favor the Gilded Gladiators as they take it for a first pick. But what does that now leave for the Camelot Kings? Immediately I start thinking of three of the top assassins,
Yeah.
Pele, Camazotz, and Set, all still available. And the Camelot Kings could pick any 2 of those or anything alongside them.
Yeah, because it's the Camelot Kings, I don't think you have to lock in the Pele, right? That's, as far as I'm concerned, it's Pele and then Camazotz and Set. I may be wrong about that, but that just seems to be the ease of execution on Pele is just so much easier. Set, I still think is relatively easy, but you got to be careful about your all-in. Pele's more forgiving in that sense, where you can get out just because you have insane movement speed and healing that isn't as impactful as Kingslayer's, but is easier to, go for here. So the Freya trying to get a great ADC to match that pressure of Chernobog, I think is a smart look. You're going to have insane pressure with Ares anyways to try and bridge that gap between that early game that's a bit rough and then that late game where Freya is just disgusting. But the Gilded Gladiators now have their choice of trying to grab a top-tier jungle for Kyrmi, and I'm curious if that is what they're going to prioritize. We already talked about it many, many times. Kyrmi is the driving force of this squad. He's the spearhead, and getting him on a god that he is not only comfortable on, but something that can excel in the early game, extremely important. That Ratatoskr could be that pick. Of course, it's got the propensity to be played in solo lane as well, but doesn't scream to me a Kana god as much as, just rat out of the jungle. Makes a little bit more sense for. So, couple that with an Aphrodite, that makes things a little interesting.
Now, Aphrodite, historically here, at least in Season 10 of the SPL, hasn't looked the best. Unless you're awesome Jake408. When he was on the Oni Warriors, he looked insane on this pick. In fact, we like to sometimes say that he kind of gaslit the entire league into thinking this is a great pick, and then nobody else was able to replicate his performance on this style of pick. Now, though, he's not on that #1 team. He's not with the Oni Warriors, that team that could really kind of pivot around this style of pick. With the Chernobog and Ratatoskr, do you like the Aphrodite as this pick for Jake, or would you have rather maybe seen something else for him?
I mean, so far, there is nothing that tells me Aphrodite is a good pick, and I'll tell you why. If you think about what Rat and Chernobog want to do with their ultimates, none of that is be linked to an Aphrodite and stay really close to her, right? They're going to go up to the sky, they're going to fly away. So unless Jake is already where they're flying to, you're not going to have that link. Doesn't mean they can't lock in some hard carriers in the bottom 2 that Aphrodite would be okay with being linked to. My guess is they're trying to bridge that gap in the early game like I just talked about. They've got Ares, they've got Freya. They're like, how do we match up against Ares Freya? How do we get this Chernobog online? Aphrodite is going to make sure that the Ares chains aren't that big of a deal. The ultimate is not that big of a deal. It's just, if you're picking just for lane matchups, you got to think about how impactful lane matchups really are late game. Not so much, right? It's all about team fight then. And Aphrodite, with this comp so far, is not bringing so much to that team fight. Whereas, if you have something like a Set, that makes a lot more sense to me, right? You're attached to a Set, you let him die with Kingslayer, you have it just beads, Aegis, healing, the back off, the slows, all of that is so much more impactful for an assassin like that. So we'll have to see if the Gilded Gladiators have more hard carries to grab in the bottom 2, and if they do, where's their front line?
Kings go for Ares Freya Set for their top 3, and ban away Morgan Le Fay and Raijin from the Gilded Gladiators. Opposite side, we do see those other 2 assassins alongside Set that kind of round out that top 3 for their flexibility, and Camazotz and Pele banned by the Gladiators. Thor now the lock-in for the Camelot Kings. And I guess we'll have to kind of wait until this last pick goes through there, but with Set and Thor already locked in, and considering that Thor has primarily been going over to the solo lane as of recent, we've seen a little bit of jungle from players like maybe Panatom or Oath. Do you think that this is a Thor jungle for CaptainTwig, or do you think that maybe we still have yet to see Twig's pick?
I would guess we have not seen Twig's pick based on what we've seen so far. That Set is almost certainly going to BMT, and I imagine Variety can pilot this Thor no problem. But there is still one more pick to be had, so we'll hold off on my 100% guarantee for a second. Once again, the Huang being locked in there for Snoopy. I've said it before, this pick is so hit or miss, and more often than not, those ults aren't connecting, so you gotta watch out, and you gotta make sure that when you hit Dueling Dragons, or when you even cast Dueling Dragons, it is impactful. but I have still not really seen why this pick is so highly prioritized when there are so many better options available. So we'll have to see. You know, I would like to be proven as to why this pick is something that Snoopy keeps leaning towards. I guess it's the safety, right? The amount of CC immunity he has into a matchup like Ares can be nice. Into a matchup like Set can be nice. But it's not easy, right? It's not easy to confirm that damage. On the other side, because it was a Hercules and a possible Shiva hover, makes me think the CaptainTwig might be trying to take this Thor pick.
Which is wild because there was a point where we had CaptainTwig play the Thor into that game and said, I haven't touched that god in like 2 years, and maybe that's the last time I touch it for a while.
I
So
do
we'll
remember
see
that tweet.
if he's gotten some Thor practice in since then, because it is a Cerberus final pick for the Camelot Kings to round out their composition. So Set mid, Thor jungle for the squad of the Camelot Kings. So very standardized drafts on both sides of the field. But with this Aphrodite, I think one of the things that I talk with the inbound about is kind of that immediate access to CC along with the Aphrodite to try and help out this pick. Do the Gilded Gladiators with their composition have some of that extra kind of immediate go button CC to pair along a pick like this?
I don't love it. I mean, the only pick that really to me screamed, I mean, I guess you can use the Rat because if you're going to link to either Bellona or Rat, they're going to dash in or Eagles rally in, then you get the free back off, then you CC immune them and say, hey, go pop off. But it's not the easiest time. I've already explained how the Rat ult is going to unlink every time, so you don't want to be on to Kyrmi all game. And it's not like Cxnnahh can just hard carry away. This Bellona is not really in a position in this current meta where she can build enough damage to just get value from that link. So it's not my favorite. I will say the Camelot Kings, in my opinion, got the better end of the draft just about every lane. Besides, I guess, duo until late when Freya's just going to win the boxing match against just about anyone in the game. So it's going to be difficult to try and deal with it. I think that the one pick that makes a lot of sense to me is Aphro into Set, right? If you're able to get the Undying Love off once the skewer comes through, you can immune a big portion of that burst. Besides the Ares pull that I already mentioned, right? If you're able to Undying Love the Ares pull, that does change a little bit of the value. But so far, from what we've seen from this Ares pick, the reason that it's in the meta right now is not for the ultimate. It is not because, oh, I get some sweet pulls. It's because the chains and the flames in lane are kind of nuts, right? You just have so much pressure. If you get those chains onto these characters that rely on dashes, they just can't do anything. So it's going to be pretty disgusting to try and deal with. Thor wall into chain, just run that person down, repeat the process.
So I think my next question then comes here on the Camelot King side of the draft. We know that Cerberus did get a little bit of a buff coming into this patch, a little bit of extra prot shred coming his way. Is it that enough to kind of bring him up, or do you think also maybe because this Aphrodite is in here that this is maybe an extra kind of boost to go for the Cerberus style pick?
I think that when I think of Cerberus in particular, Variety is one of the first people that comes to my mind. I just have so many massive Stygian torments in my brain from when he used to play this pick in solo lane like religiously. So with that being said, you already have a decent matchup with the Aphrodite, and you have a magical carry on your team that can benefit from Ghastly Breath, the prot shred that Freya provides. So I like the buffs, I like the anti-heal, I like the CC. It's just, are you consistently hitting that damage, right? That is a big deal, because if you're not hitting that paralyzing spit, you're losing a big portion of what makes that kit so strong.
I was just informed, apology, but we do have a brief delay of game here because unfortunately the man on your screen here did pick a banned skin, and so we do have to remake the lobby.
Everyone point and laugh at Kyrmi.
I'm trying to think of what skins there are. I think
the new Robo one.
There is the new Robo one.
I was
thinking
I know exactly what it was.
Either that one, or I was thinking like the old like cell shaded anime ones from like the Dodgy Adventure way back. I think those ones are also competent. But regardless of that, it will be a quick remake for these players to try and get themselves right back into the game. So
look at Jake. Jake's like, my jungler just picked a band skin.
He's just sitting there like, come on, man.
He's like, I was just gonna play Afro, I was gonna link and just do nothing all game, and now I have to wait because
now I gotta wait.
Kyrmi.
I gotta wait another 5 minutes before we can do that, just because Kyrmi's ruining the party. But kind of talking about the Gilded Gladiators here, where's kind of the strongest point of their game? Is this a team that's going to excel in the early game? Is this one that's going to be a bit better when it gets to kind of these mid-game Beacon, Gold Fury fights? Or is this one that wants to get and be ahead for late game?
I could be wrong about this, but their comp to me looks like it's only good from ahead, right? I mean, Aphrodite loses so much value if she can't stay in fights consistently and be a little bit tanky and heal up her squad. Whereas the Camelot Kings, they have such good surprise engage, right? If someone overcommits, Stygian Torment can be massive. Anvil of Dawn on a full damage Thor is going to be different as well. You got to think, we're so used to seeing this tanky Thor build from solo, But when you see it in the jungle, yeah, Thor dies a lot faster, but he can also one-shot just delete you off of a double tap or off of an Anvil of Dawn you weren't expecting. So I think the Camelot Kings composition is so much, easier to execute on, very hard to mess up. There's no dueling dragons that are going to just be missable, right? Yeah, you could miss Anvil of Dawn, but Thor can still get value out of that easy CC. And the other thing is, they've got early pressure with the double assassins. They've got late game with the Freya and the Cerberus like shredding for each other. And they've got double Guardian, which means so much CC. I'm not going to say that the Gilded Gladiators comp is just unwinnable, but it just seems so much more difficult to execute on.
So Charlie, riddle me this. You load into this game, you're CaptainTwig.
Right.
You look at the comp that the Gilded Gladiators have. Which lane are you putting your focus in if you want to get your team ahead? Or are you sitting there and saying, hey, we don't need to do anything. I can just sit here and just keep power farming the jungle. What's kind of your ideal spot for CaptainTwig in a matchup like this?
As far as I'm concerned, you're probably looking towards solo lane just because Bellona is going to have teleport early. And when you have two massive CC abilities like Anvil of Dawn and Stingy and Torment, more often than not what happens is Variety goes for the ult, Kana's going to ult it himself and just say, all right, we traded ults and that's going to be that. Then CaptainTwig comes over and says, hey, I've got Anvil of Dawn. We can just CC chain and just try and 100 to 0 this Bellona. And because you can't really build Manticore spikes on Bellona, you're missing one of those core early game items that'll give you physical and magical protections, or in this case, just HP, right? More often than not, you're going into like Shoguns because you're up against the Cerberus, or, you know, the Berserker shield because you're up against a physical. But you're not going to get too much dual value up against a magical and a physical. So early game ganks could go over to solo lane pretty easily.
So for Kana in this matchup, is there maybe a preference for you on his build path? Would you rather see build directly into defense on his direct lane opponent, or maybe because there is that looming threat of CaptainTwig walking by, would you rather him see kind of build into that physical defense a little bit earlier on?
It's honestly just what you're feeling. I think that because you're going to be getting your healing stolen anyways, it's not like Death Toll even gives you that much value, right? You don't want to just try and CC up. So Shoguns or even the actual just mitigation style of that tree is so nice because the Oni Hunter's Garb is going to give you sort of dual protections in that way. But it means your lane is just so much worse. It's a difficult matchup to try and fight into. You just have to stall and clear waves, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think that more often than not, some of these lanes are just a double down. Like, how many times did we walk Herc versus Thor last set, where it was just, hey, we're not fighting, we are clearing the wave, and then we'll just go our separate waves. I'll see you back when the minions meet again, right? You don't really have to win that 1v1. You have to watch out for when the junglers show up.
Now, I will say, it's a bit more magical focus on the Camelot Kings, so maybe this one's going to be an under. I was going to say, what's your over-under on the breastplate of determination? And we look back in our previous set with Leviathans and the Hounds, I believe it was 5 in game 1, and then 3, 3, and 2 for the total build. But you look at the Kings, and a lot of their kind of big core immediately. Their front line is double magic. Your hyper carry is double magic is also magic with the Freya. Is this one where maybe building breastplate as the Gladiators is good for that initial defense, or would you rather maybe just see them going towards a bit more of the damage, especially for your more damage-focused players?
It's not useless, but I'd say you lose a lot of the value, right? I think that the reason we saw so many breastplates in that meta was just because it was 4 Fizz. You're not building it into the Freya Ares Cerb comp, right? Unless you're just a traditional tank that wants it. Aphrodite needs CDR. Chronos Pendant doesn't seem great in this matchup because you want as much protections as possible. So because it's awesome Jake, we still might see it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jake picks it up. It's not that great on Bellona because you just want to be as tanky as possible, then get your attack speed online. And cooldown doesn't really do either of those things.
We'll have to see if the Camelot Kings can keep up their win streak from the previous set, or can the Gilded Gladiators find their bounce back. Let's jump into game number 1 with Gormizer and Inbound.
Thanks so much, J-Mac and Trelly. That's right, it's Gore, it's Inbound, and it's Doug giving us the window into the battleground, and one I'm excited for. And though things have changed since this statement was last true, Inbound, we were at least talking about the fact that the Gladiators, and times, and I guess depending on when you slice like history and team names, you could add the Scarabs onto that list. Although, notably, you were the common factor, I think, for a majority of this. But oddly enough, always have a weird thing against the Kings, it feels like. Chat doesn't seem to think so. 16 to 84. That's a very, very high. I kind of wish I got in on the bidding. If you vote for the Gladiators here and they win, that's a lot of money you're going to be making.
Good odds right there. But you see the comps drafted by both teams, and it's hard not to favor the Kings. With,
Yeah.
I mean, 84% is high, but when you have gods like Cerb, Set, Thor, Ares, Freya, if I listed all these gods, you'd be surprised if most of them were not banned. And the Kings have all of them just on their side.
Yeah, at that point, it's like, oh, you're talking like top 5, like each of those teams, like 3's on one side, and that's like a really good top 3, but like the other team got 2 really OP picks. And then you're talking like Afro, Huang. I know the desk was talking about Jake's Afro, and this is a conversation. I might vilify myself mentioning this and saying it this way, but it feels like it was something that worked really well on the Warriors because of who Jake was around. And it was something that was easy, like Miff and I would talk about it all through Phase 1, where it was just like, yeah, just kiss somebody, and odds are they could pop off the next fight, and it did not matter who you hit. Here it feels like you've got to be a little more selective to make sure that the flow of the game isn't disrupted, right? Like if Kyrmi's popping off, you want to keep with Kyrmi.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any knock on the Glads, it's more so praise on the Warriors.
They were just real
how
good.
talented that team was. You put an Afro with just about any other god in a 2v2 and they're winning that. This 2v2, Afro, Chernobog, it's going to be an okay laning phase, but playing against Ares, playing against Freya, they have really good grouping, really good shred on this wave. It's going to be a tough laning phase, but Afro's picked in this matchup, especially into Ares, just to basically nullify the lane and then trade a little bit and then sustain that trade.
Now, here's something. Admittedly, I don't typically glance at the relics for the mid laners because most of the time it's just beads and Aegis. But there's an Ankh for Snoopy, and I know like Huang has that immunity, but that still feels like a dangerous territory to be in with all the CC on the other side, especially knowing what the Kings are capable of in the right hand.
Yeah, I would not disagree. I'm a big believer in beads is not what you need to do every single game. If you're playing ADC, you're playing mid, I think beads can sometimes be a misplay. Actually looking for Quig right here. Kyrmi on the side.
He's got
Picks
it.
up the kill. Whoop. Bead forces. Jarcorr's actually getting super low too. Beads are down. Nothing. Ooh. Whew.
That fadeaway from
Snuck
Stu was
that in.
clean. Too bad it doesn't get him the kill, though. Like you said, though, first blood, I mean, that's a really big deal. Gets it onto Kyrmi. And then, of course, we get to see Snoopy now go into some immunity. And that maybe showcases why the beads aren't, and Aegis to an extent, aren't necessary at the very beginning.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the idea behind it, but if you really think about it, he has to be so on point with that 3, with that ult. If he's even caught out by a Thor ult, Thor wall, a lot of times he's going to be dying before he is able to get into that immunity or that levitation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily immunity, but before he can levitate into the air. I think that's what we got to highlight for this early portion of the game until he gets that second relic. Snoopy is super susceptible to being killed, but he does have that Ankh, and to be fair, we have to highlight the strength of this Ankh into the Camelot Kings side of things. You look at it into Cerb, you look at it into Set, it increases your damage against them when they are actually looking for an all-in. Cerb at almost any point, and Set whenever he pops that 3 and that ult. So that's something we got to keep our eye on in these little scuffles. Little 1,300 gold lead, not bad already.
That's a good word, by the way, scuffle.
I love that
Because
word.
I feel like that's what a lot of like the early game is as well. It's like it's a lot of little scuffles. And sometimes even late game, you just end up finding a little scuffle. You'll find a true fight every now and then, but yeah, scuffles will be what Snoopy's going to have to look to survive. And like you said, it's small lead, but one that is coming from partially the first blood bounty and then partially just farm game, right? I mean, that's impressive from the Gladiators here. And that's the question, I guess, of how much pressure they're able to put on. Haven't seen it manifest fully in a lot of experience just yet, so no massive leads. I'm really curious to see where they end up going. I'm also watching the Kings carefully because they do have a lot of readily available CC, and it feels like if you can force Snoopy to feel awkward and force his 3 with 1, you've got a lot of quick follow-up to potentially cause another. I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to dunk, and the dunk's not going to connect, but good luck when you land because the wall's right there. Things like that, maybe for Twig. That being said, he's never been like this crazy. He's not a not early game player, but he also isn't an early game player strictly, right? If he needs to be, he can step up into it, but do you expect to maybe see him kind of get active early on?
Yeah, I would expect him to mostly just doing farming. I think he'll fight if maybe Kyrmi wants to fight or Jake wants to fight. And I think that is something we should highlight when he doesn't go this beads option. I think this spells out that Jake is going to be looking to rotate mid to give him that immunity with the
good
beads
point.
Aegis Afro ult.
Wow, that's a lot of immunity just on one guy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would make the most sense to me. Stuart also on the global god in duo lane, playing solo by himself would make the most sense to me. And then that would make the Onk not seem as strange, I guess.
It'll be fun to watch. And at this rate, I mean, he's level 6. There's only been a couple of scuffles, as we've seen. And so it's not a big deal. Beads forced by Kyrmi, though. Great dunk by Twig, but there's the engage from Kana. Stun. Gonna get Beads out by Twig. Hammer over the wall. Gets him disengaged. Variety follows up with a leap of his own. So a couple of relics used. Ults used as well. As you can see, the jungler's starting to get active.
Yeah, no surprise there. Both are mostly early mid-game characters. Both looking to be going into that ultimate and then chasing. Blue buff also spawning. Variety has ult here. Kyrmi has ult. The other two do not. We have a tier 2 breastplate on the Cerb. Full Shoguns on Kana and Quig walking out of base to this blue buff. Something seems to be sniffed out. Variety actually has ult if he hits that. Maybe potential there, but just trying to drive him out to get that blue buff.
Especially, yeah, you know, Kyrmi is missing beads, so if you're going to go for your ult, you force Kyrmi to go into an ult. And Kana doesn't have ult, doesn't have beads at the time, so it could have been, as you mentioned, a bigger play, but the distance just wasn't there. I'm also a really big fan, and maybe not in this matchup, maybe in this matchup a little bit, but I love Bellona. Like, I've just, ever since she was released, she was also really strong when she came out. And even that might still be a little bit of an understatement.
She was different.
Cue the people playing her and having a 1v4 at like level 1 and winning. There was definitely some things that needed to be tuned, but she's just so, I guess, like iconic, a little bit unique, like a lot of what she brings to the table. It's always nice when Bellona's back in the meta, but do you like her into Cerberus, or do you just like her as like a team fighter?
I think it's a big pick into Freya right now. Whenever Freya pops that 2, it's that timing cooldown. And then she matches up well against physical gods with that, you know, she builds just protections really easily. She wants to build a lot of physical protections mostly. No ADC on the side of the Kings, but that matchup into Freya. If she does use her 2, she gets that ranged form, you know, 5-6 seconds. And then Bellona 3 stops that for another 3 seconds.
Because of the pace of the game, I'm going to ask this, and there is a good reason behind it, but what do you think, like, in your opinion, like, what's the most annoying form of CC in Smite, like, when you're playing?
Slows. Because I'm a Guardian player.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes sense, because then you don't go anywhere. Kyrmi right now caught out. Picked up, thrown back, is going to be just fine, it would seem like. In fact, he's going to re-engage, goes in, gets the dash onto Variety. Now has to match up, Twig up, down onto Jake, gets some damage. Kyrmi still linked to the Aphrodite, jumping around on the branches. Dunks in, goes for Twig. Gets the knock up, there's the leap in, and Kana's leading the way for him. Stuart has rotated. It's a 5v3, and the Gladiators play this fight smart. They bait the Kings in, and they knock them down. A 3-0 lead for him now, 7.5 in.
There is one rule when the enemy team is playing a global character. You try your best to not fight on the opposite side, and what do the Kings do? They take a 4v4 on the opposite side of the map. Stu's able to rotate over near instantly. Jarcorrr forced to stay on the duo side of the map. But to be honest, I don't even know if they needed Stu, really. That was a really clean engage, really clean fight, and it looked a little not clean at first, but then the big Bellona ult, Jake actually caught out here. Looks like he will be going down. No ult for another at least 10 seconds. A little trade. Yeah. Little trade. But you still compare it to the other side of the map. Glads have 2k gold right now. Big lead at this beginning, and I think this is what we need to highlight. This is what the Glads need to be doing. That late game is good. Don't get me wrong, it's good. But the thing about the backline dive, Bellona, Rat are not going to be getting as much done as this Kings comp in that late game. You see that Set, Thor, Cerb, a lot of threat on the backlines. Ares able to threaten beads, get enough damage off, and then Freya also.
Freya.
Freya late game is Freya late game, exactly. So I think the Glads need to continue controlling this. They need to start pushing their leads, I think, a little bit more. I mean, we're only 8 minutes in. It's not like it's 15 minutes or something like that. But this Gold Fury is up. Pyro will be spawning 3 minutes or something like that. That's what I want to see the Glads do. I want to start seeing them rotate to these objectives and start pushing for them. Yeah,
focus on, like you said, furthering your advantage wherever you can find it. Even if it's just a small step forward in the form of a kill, maybe some mid camps. Right now aren't necessarily going your way, but the big ones, the Pyromancer, the Gold Fury in the next few minutes, as well as this Beacon when it spawns up. Some big opportunities for the Gladiators. No, the reason I asked about CC is because I feel like disarms, if it's, you know, if you're playing a Guardian, 90% of the time you don't feel it. Speaking of feeling it, right now, knock up just avoided by Jarcorrr, goes into the sky, but can you get away? The damage is there. The chase from Kyrmi and Stu is clean, and Jarcorrr has no answer to the gank from the jungler on the Gladiators. They make sure to answer that kill onto Jake in kind. And now you've got a pretty big rotation there going into the Gold Fury pit, pulling back. Maybe looking to see if they're clear. Kings aren't going to be in the neighborhood. Fury started up by the Gladiators. Already half health. Quig going to spot it out. Twig and Tings are going to be able to come over. Twig's up in the sky. And he's going to dunk down onto Jake. Jake kind of tanky now, but still an Aphrodite. Surrounded by 3, needs a little bit of help from his team. Chernobog into the wall, has to dash away, and Stuart on the fadeaway throwing out some autos. You need some rotations. Snoopy comes in, damage is there, 1 for 1. Jake for Twig, a favorable trade for the Gladiators, and a disengage that gets him out of there.
And the Kings are fighting another fight that is not in their favor. They're fighting another 3v4. Snoopy is able to rotate there faster than Jarcorrr can come from base. Results in that 3v4. And just another clean play by the Glads. They didn't stick to that Gold Fury. They were able to change up their call, whether it was let's bait Gold Fury or let's do Gold Fury, and then they saw them walk in. Either way, they set up the Kings into a near unwinnable play. And then when the Kings went for it, Glads were there, Glads are ready. And that's the first Huang ult we've also seen. They can hit 2 people. That's a good start. We need to see Snoopy hitting ults if he's going to be piloting this Huang and piloting it effectively.
Especially, I mean, you think of all the Huangs we saw, I guess, Phase 1. And what he was able to do last year also comes to my mind, where there were players, and Pagon stands up at the top of that list, but we saw it kind of across the league, where if you're hitting 2-man ults, you could be at your Phoenix line and have been losing the game. And suddenly that is a winning play for your team. So keep your eyes on Snoopy. Because even though we've been seeing him a lot less, and even though, depending on who you're talking to about mid lane, he might not be the most favorable, I do think that he's going to be a very fun god to watch throughout this game.
And that is actually a slight positive that like Huang and Scylla have when they do come out and people forget about how to play against them.
Yeah.
That can be a very surprising ult. I know Snoopy's played it a couple times, but other than Snoopy, we're not seeing this god. And if you do get to those Phoenix sieges, whether it is an offensive siege or a defensive siege, you always have to have eyes on the Huang. You always have to remember where he is, because it is one-shot potential followed up by some other ability somewhere. You are getting one shot.
All you have is just, hey, I got him. Like, that's all you need. Huang, he can, like you said, follow it up himself, but sometimes as long as your team's there, it'll make a big difference. We're a long cry, or a far cry, I should say, from any sort of Phoenix sieges. All 6 towers still standing. Stygian Beacon just now spawns in. The Gladiators have 3 standing on it, 2 from the Kings in the neighborhood. Variety's going to contest. Try to get a little pressure back onto them. Tings as well is in the area. Quig going to go ahead and walk on in, and now the Kings with a numbers advantage. Going to undo some of the Gladiators' progress. Still like an 1/8 of the bar in their favor. And not the hard commit that I thought we would see. We do have Connor rotating in alongside Variety, so it is a pretty heavy-handed rotation from both squads. Not going to be a massive fight, though. And it fizzles out with 4 of the Gladiators standing on it, capturing it, and backing away.
And you see, you know, Stu kind of giving up a lot of pressure over here. Jarcorrr has that 2nd ring finished. A near unwinnable 1v1 at this point. Does not matter what you have on your side. Freya with Telekind's hastened means that's her lane, and you're going to have to respect her, play around that. Kyrmi also understanding that. Jake also understanding that. Coming to this side of the map, helping Stu out a little bit. And these are the fights. This is the point in the game that we have to see improvements from the Glads. Actually, a slight grouping here, 3v2 on the gold.
Might be able to find something massive here. Quig goes up, has chains on 3, goes for the pull, and only grabs 2. Stu dodges it out in the wall. Quig stunned out. The lockdown, not quite there. Damage is good, but you have to be careful. Up to the sky go Kyrmi and Twig. Is the Thor going to go in? And where does he go if he does? No, he decides to dunk down in mid. Variety's teleported over, which you would think would suddenly be the clarifying, yes, go in, fight. But instead it's immune to out. Variety maybe out of place. No help from his team. And now maybe we have the engage that's necessary for the other side. No, Stu's not going to go in. A very interesting engagement from the Kings.
Yeah, interesting for the Kings. Actually, fantastic play by the Glads all around. They don't take the all-ins. They have the sustain, so this is just a huge win. Khan is not even forced to rotate. Goldfear is actually getting low, about a quarter. Jarcorrr walking in. Huang ult gets the secure. Jake gets the stun into Jark. Nothing Jark can do at that point. But fantastic plays by the Glads. That's a 4v5 fight.
Yeah.
They got good poke onto the Ares. They saw or heard They saw or heard Twig go into the air. Variety rotated over. And they didn't take the all-in, and that's what you need to do with this Afro. I don't know if it's Jake that is just so confident, smart on this Afro that's really just guiding this, or if it's just the Gladiators playing a really good brand of mid-game Smite.
And honestly, it's that, like you said, that mentality, and something that we haven't gotten to see from the Gladiators consistently has been this, I'm going to call it great shot calling, which is in that moment, if we go in, if you're fighting there, Twig's just going to dunk on you, you lose that fight. Instead, to pull back, to retreat in that moment and make his ult just feel awkward and force him even better for you to go back to mid lane, and he appears on the minion wave, suddenly you know that you can at least withstand any onslaught the Kings bring towards you, and they get the fury out of it as well. So the Gladiators now over 3,000 in their lead. In fact, they're pushing on to a 4,000 gold lead, 3,600. And if they can get a little more, it could be massive. Pyromancer's up. And there was a almost rotation from Jarcorrr, but it looks like he's going to be going back towards left. This has been a huge lane, and now you're actually looking at it 2 levels, not just in solo, but also in the carries. That's massive, both for Kana and for Stuart.
This is a perfect setup for the Glads. 4K gold, but a big part of it is also XP that they have this advantage. This Pyro is something they need to take this fight on, and it's not something they want to take too slowly. I'm glad they're already pulling this. It's already down to half.
It's going to be contested. Variety coming around the back and has some damage. Stun onto Snoopy is looking good for him, and it's Kana and Stuart up in the front of the Kings. Instead, Variety goes in, goes for the ult. Up to the sky go a lot of the Gladiators, and crashing down goes Variety into the ground. Same with Twig now here onto the Gladiators, trying to get the fight back. Kyrmi's low, Jake's low, but it's Tingz who's taking the poke. Tingz who has to teleport away, and the Kings who are losing this engagement. Pyromancer does not get picked up, but the Gladiators still find a kill onto Variety.
And another play where the Kings fight on the side of the map they are weak on, and Stu just ults over. The Kings are not playing smart around this Chernobog, and it's really telling with how much Stu is able to get done. He is level 16 at 16 minutes, 3-0-3. If you compare it to Jarcorrr, 0-1-1. Not been able to get much going over there. Still a level, only a level behind, but Pyro is still up. The Glads found 1 pick, and now they're looking for Quig. Quig's already half, taking a lot of damage. Wow. What a good setup by the Glads. They don't even overchase. This is perfect. Now they can just back up, go Pyro. Snoopy taking a lot of damage, though.
Yeah, he's in a little bit of trouble. That's Variety effect. At least shows up a little late to the fight, but gets the job done. Kyrmi, the lockdown between him, Kana, the jump in was phenomenal. And as you've just pointed out to me, the ult for Stuart is going to be coming back up in just a second. So if that fight actually goes on a little bit longer, if they could maybe maintain either an engagement with the Kings, or if they were feeling confident, a pull onto the Pyromancer, you could have had Stu rotate in. Now that conversation still exists. It's just going to be delayed a little bit, right? Instead of keeping that fight going for it, it's next fight, you've got Stu if you need him. And that could be a massive play. It's 7-2. 17.5 into this, and again, they're pushing now 4,000 gold, 4,300 experience.
Yeah, and it's kind of, stagnated a little bit. 4K gold, it's been 4K gold for a little bit. So we want to see them start pushing these objectives, getting these beacons, looking for Pyro. Gold is actually respawning. So this is 2 objectives spawning. Stu got his back off. He's now also got an Xe finished. He is feeling very strong. But on the opposite side, you also have to look at Jarcorrr. Just finished that 3rd ring. The carries at this point and the solo laners at this point, feeling very strong. Both finishing their 3rd items. Well, Variety very close to that 3rd item.
Yeah, he's 1 more back away. Potentially, with 1,500 gold in pocket. I have to imagine we'd see it. Unfortunately for him, it doesn't seem like he's going to have the opportunity to back. Pyro started, already down to 1/3 health. Variety, once again, loops around the back, damage over the wall, helps out the Gladiators, and they secure this Pyromancer. Kyrmi, up into the sky, still attached to Jake. The team trying to decide, are they going in? What I love is watching the Aphrodite pathing. And it kind of maybe reveals there that, no, Kyrmi's not going in. He falls back. So do the rest of the Gladiators, not overextending. They get themselves the Pyro, and they tap out.
4,500 gold. Gold Fury is up. They're down a good amount of ults. 3 ults down, and the Kings have all 5. This is where the Glads have to play smart. It might not feel great playing slightly defensive at this point, but you are not strong. Even though you have a 4K gold lead, those ultimates need to be up for you to take this fight. And I like that the Glads are respecting it a little bit. Jake, Kyrmi frontlining a tiny bit. Looking to actually rotate over, looking at Jake.
And Jake getting burned pretty quickly here. Now Twig's up in the air, and he's going to dunk onto Stu. They're separated. It's isolated, and now Variety comes in, pulls in Stu. It's a 2-man swing already, and you've got Quig looking for another. Going to force the beads out of the Bellona. Kyrmi comes in. They're looking for a fight, but it almost turned disastrous. Might still go. Great stun from Variety. but a small conveyor belt. One by one, the Gladiators march in, and at least one by one, and only those 2 ones, fall down. The duo lane gone for the Gladiators. Fury open for the Kings, and a fight with the amount of gold they're going to get from the objective bring us back into a pretty even state for the Kings.
And the Glads were kind of fronting there. They were kind of showing, look how strong we are, trying to see if the Kings would respect them. But the veteran players they are, they know they have the ultimate advantage. Jake ult was still down for a little bit longer. Same with Stu's, same with Kyrmi's. And that's just not a fight the Glads could win. Jake takes way too much damage. He's up by himself. Followed by... someone else died too. Stu died too, and he lost beads. No Aegis though. Game is kind of stagnated a bit. 2k gold now. After that great early game, honestly, by the Glads. Very clean early game. Kings, the mid-game Kings come back. Even this game up a bit.
And I'm sure you, unfortunately, had like the issue of having to listen to us say this a lot, but the first 15 minutes for the Gladiators always have been seemingly really great. It's carrying that into those late-game fights, and the times we've seen it, it has been awesome. And honestly, really entertaining to see what they have. Not necessarily out of it. That's something that we have to be clear with. They are still very much in the lead. Not just kill-wise, experience-wise, but gold-wise. They've got everything going for them. It's just a little bit less of a hill than they had before. Right now, only the Fire Giant's up, and unless the Kings or, I guess, the Gladiators really want to make a risky play, I anticipate we maybe see something more or less like this. Kana CC'd to hell. Uses the ult to get over the wall, tries to get away, but there's just no escaping this. The no escape used. Pulls him in, and you've got 5 on top of you. It's going to be a pretty clean, easy kill for the Kings. Heavy investment, but one that pays off. And now you've got everybody over on the right-hand side. Are they going to go for a Fire Giant pull?
I mean, they have the consistent damage to somewhat do it. They're not going to shred it, really. I mean, it's already half, I guess. Maybe they will shred it.
The shred seems to be there. I don't know where it's coming from. Freya, normally not the one you're thinking of for the objectives. They got everybody else. Kyrmi up to the sky. Fire Giant getting low. Kyrmi dunks in. Gladiators! They get the Fire Giant. Kyrmi loses his life, but they take the objective. Now you just got to disengage Jake. Caught out by the stun. Up into the air goes Twig. Dunks down to cover the path. Hammer. Wow. Double tap. Kill will be there. 3 gone on the Gladiators, but the FG still on 2.
And those are plays where you're happy you stole the Fire Giant, but it's still, now we're losing our tier 1 tower in mid. Maybe they're going to be threatening this tier 2, and it seems like they are going to be going for the tier 2. This game is now going to be delayed for the next few minutes. No Fire Giant, no Gold Fury. Pyro's going to be spawning right now. We've got an even game that's going to be delayed with not too much going on for the next few minutes. It'll be mostly farming until 20. A couple misplays by the Glads. Kana so far up in right lane. Massive rotation by the Kings to go kill him, shut him down. He had no beads available at that moment. Fire Giant, luckily, stolen by the Glads. If we're talking about the Kings having Fire Giant right now, the Glads not stealing that, completely different game.
Yeah, we're talking about pure defense conversation, and maybe Phoenix line defense, considering how fast we see Kana getting shredded. Tings as well, half health. Kyrmi is going to go in, doesn't get the knock-up, but has the damage, needs a little help from the team, but he can't find it. No hit to get the kill. Tings walks out, and Kyrmi loses his life for the trouble. The Gladiators try to keep things going, but it's the Kings who are in charge. Twig gets the dunk. Twig had the damage, but Twig ate too much. Seems like he's going to be just fine to get out of here. The Kings, again, that's 2 who essentially get away with murder. A free dive in and a very risky escape, but an escape nonetheless.
I mean, Tings gets out 15 health.
Yep.
Twig then goes in after, gets out 15 health. Lucky, but sometimes it pays a lot to be lucky. 8-7, still a gold lead for the Glads, but this game is in a complete stalemate at this point. We're not talking about anything other than, I mean, we have Fire Giant on the Glads, 5v4 advantage for the Kings at this point. Gold Fury is spawning. Pretty even at this point until that next fire.
And I think what you said about how you use the phrase stalled out, and that's really what it is, right? If the Kings get that Fire Giant, you had mentioned different conversation. We're talking about tier 2s that are getting taken, but we were over 4,000 gold, and then it cut down. Then the Gladiators pull it back up to around there.
Twig
and they're going to try to do
relics.
it again. Twig, no relics. Twig with his life still walking out. Kana is committed, and Kana has overcommitted. Tings does go down, so it is at least a 1-for-1 with Kana losing his life there. Twig went up. Twig retreats, and the Fury as well going over towards the Gladiators. maintain some of that gold lead. Goes to show, I was getting worried for him. I felt like that lead may be necessary to overcome the underdog status. But as we see, they're scrappy right now and making the Kings second guess.
And we actually have a wraparound by the Kings. This is going to be a 4v4 fight. We have very few relics up at this point. This is going to be a big fight for both teams.
Variety has his ults. Twigs is halfway down. Variety goes in, gets stunned, and is looking for some CC. Forces Snoopy into the up-down. No beads for the Huang, and that means this is going to be an easy pull-in. Damage is there, and Quig is set up, but the dash, the ult, it's been used. Snoopy's low, and you need a little bit more. Ting's still not alive for 2 more. Jake might be the sacrificial lamb here in this 4v4. The CC from Variety is good, but everybody else gets out. Dies for his team, but keeps him alive.
And you can tell that sustain that Afro usually brings is not there when the Cerb is around. Cerb passive.
Yep.
Cerb's got the Tainted also. A lot of anti-heal that he's able to apply by himself. And with that pick onto Jake, the Titans are fighting down and right. Khan is trying to get here quickly, trying to kill this Titan. Because if he doesn't kill this quick enough, the Kings can look to push down right. Maybe not Phoenix push down, but can push down right, maybe get a tier 1, tier 2 with this 5v4 advantage. Does seem like Kana got enough damage onto that Titan where maybe it dies. It'll be close.
Almost enough that they kill each other in the process. Kana actually might be in a little bit of trouble. Stunned out by Variety. Now the team, that is the Kings, have something a little more lucrative in mind. It's tier 1 tower and then fall back. Fire Giant is going to be respawning and just a little over 30 seconds, maybe just a little under, as it fades away from the Gladiators. Last time around, it's a steal that ends up going well, not something that you can reliably count on. So the Kings down 1,900 gold, but at 26 minutes, that stops to be a huge impact.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty negligible at this point. 500 gold is basically nothing. We're getting to full builds on a lot of the squishies. I guess we have some recipes left on both sides, some tier 2s opted into instead. And it's interesting to see how some of the players keep their recipe and some prefer that stat spike. Tier 2 trans for Kyrmi instead of that bow. We actually have a 4-man grouping here. Kyrmi dashes in into 4 people. If somebody's maybe paying a little bit more attention, maybe we're talking about a different story, but Kyrmi dashes in, gets out. And this is the game the Glads want to play, this poke, but not this all in.
Yeah, Jake, a little bit of trouble. Going to force the ult immediately, so Undying Love off the board. Quig is a big proponent of that. Great dunk from Twig, but not able to find any follow-up. The damage was still there. Jump in from Kana, and it's separating. Low health bars starting to spread all around, but Jarcorr's in the sky. Shots from the Valkyrie's discretion connect. Kana is the main target, but they pull back instead, and they eat Jake alive. Now Twig's gone in, and Twig is here to play. Picks up Kana, gets a great double tap onto Stuart, and is looking for one more hit. Double kill for the jungler. 4 gone on the Gladiators, and the Kings can fall back to this Fire Giant with ease.
And great fight by the Kings there. They slowly just chip away, and then take that all in, not allowing the Glads to get the full heal off. And I think right now we have to take a look at the Glads comp and what's really lacking. And it's, you see the dive and you see the Aphrodite, and this is almost an all-in comp drafted around the Aphrodite, and it's just seeming to not pay off. Kana goes in, gets burned a lot, and his retreat is not as good as a normal solo laner's retreat as a Bellona. And you look at Kyrmi, same thing. He's an all-in character for the most part, and it's really starting to punish the Glads. Kings looking to push down mid. Phoenix should be done. No other Phoenix, most likely. Not enough time to end. Maybe they go right, get a tier 2. Maybe they look to clean up jungle. Tier 2 seems to be the answer. And a reset probably off of this.
It's going to give not only a lead stripped away from the Gladiators, but now picked up by the Kings, and they're not going to back after that tier 2. And I think the Gladiators were with you thinking that they were going to retreat instead.
They have bomb.
It's pressure
Bomb's
on the right side. Phoenix bombs down, and now it's going to be the retreat. They're trying to fall back. Maybe you could bait the Gladiators into a fight here if they go a little too far forward, but it doesn't seem like the Kings have that in mind. 14-8, the Kings have taken control of this game in the late. 29 minutes in, and 1 Phoenix, as you call, down in mid. Plenty of gold to spend as well, and you had mentioned the play around the Aphrodite. You'd also talked about the anti-heal, and you had talked about, like, variety, right? The Tainted plus his passive. Then you add in, like, the Contagion, the Brawlers. All of a sudden, it just feels like Jake's existence is just so difficult to maintain.
And that is kind of the meta that's happened, is There's so much anti-heal that happens against these healing mage supports. Aphrodite, we've seen a little bit of that hell. Sometimes, they're not really mages, but Yemoja, Terra, also healers. You'll see a ton of anti-heal built against them. But you compare the Yemoja, the Terra, to that Aphrodite hell, and there's just so much more utility that Terra, Yemoja provide. When this anti-heal comes through, Aphrodite just wants to reset. She wants to get her back off. Well, not necessarily back off. She wants to back away from the fight and then sustain up. And the Kings aren't allowing that, and the Glad's comp isn't really allowing that either.
They want to go in. And unfortunately, up to this point, the only time they've gone in and got something successful was the Fire Giant steal. And anything, if you cut it about 14 minutes prior to the 14-minute mark, was great for the Gladiators. Here, we see them set up a defense. Left side Phoenix, 30 minutes in. It's 5 strong for the Kings as they step forward to try and do it. Kyrmi looping around towards the back. Has the angle if necessary, but damage is on to Cxnnahh right now from the Kings. Kyrmi finds Twig, loses that trade. He gets knocked back towards where mid-Phoenix is. Twig is chasing for a little bit. Opts to fall back. Still 5 strong for the Kings on left. Kyrmi back in Fountain, and it gives them a moment of reprieve.
And it's going to be a somewhat tough siege with only one real ranged character in the Freya, and Cxnnahh kind of counters that. But next wave is coming in. Maybe look to a true fight here.
Try to step forward. See how fast they can shred it again. Freya not known for that, but Variety is trying to get something done. Stu is low. Kyrmi in the sky, comes into the back, looks for Jarcorrr, but cannot find the lockdown. Cxnnahh tries to do it himself, but you're just going in one by one, and Quig looks for the pull, forces some ults. Twig's in the air. The Phoenix goes down. It doesn't seem like the Thor needs to go in, but he does anyway, and he finds the stun, he finds the damage. You need one more hit, but they're not going to get it. Variety overcommits to the kill. Twig has to get out of there. Quig cannot get out of there. Tingz, Jarcorrr, last 2 left standing on the front line. And it looks like Jarcorrr might get sacrificed. Wow! Oh, he's turning it around, the Freya! The damage that he has! It's still dangerous territory. You need a little help, and you've got it in the form of a set in the mid lane. You lose your life, but you're picking up kills left and right. Twig's still low. You need a little CC if you want to kill Cxnnahh, but who cares? You traded it out 3 for 4, and the Kings still get the Phoenix.
And that is just Jarcorrr putting on his cape and becoming Superman for a few seconds. That is not a winning fight for the Kings, not at all. But then you take a look at Jarcorrr, and Jarcorrr just goes off, gets the double kill, puts enough damage onto the third person, and it's something that the Kings can kind of walk away from this fight with. We somehow won that. Somehow. Even after that Phoenix, Variety died, somehow also Cxnnahh got out there. Big med from Jake, gives him barely enough health just to get out, just to live. But now looking at this next Fire Giant, EFG spawning in about 30 seconds. 2 Phoenixes down, both strong side Phoenixes for the Kings. Someone's going to have to push up that left wave. Somebody's going to have to push up that mid wave. And the rest are going to have to be defending this Fire Giant. A tough ask for the Glads. Kings are set up for a great fight right here.
I'm keeping my eyes on mid Phoenix right now. And that's just to see if it survives long enough to make it a point. But with this last wave of Fire Minions disappearing, should be fine, and as you had mentioned, while you have to deal with the left side Fire Minions, luckily Stu has a global ultimate, so he can get over there pretty darn quickly. And you're pointing out, I want to throw a shout out to Tingz, because he's top damage by quite a bit.
Good amount.
But Snoopy, surprisingly up there. I mean, he's 1, 2, and 8. He's got a lot of assists on his belt, but I'm surprised to see that he's as far up as he is.
Yeah, and I was going to say that they didn't really have much damage in that last fight, and it's not Snoopy that's not putting out the damage. It seems to be Kyrmi lacking a little bit, only 16k compared to the 20k from CaptainTwig. You also have the sustain advantage on the Gladiator, so some of these fights feel like they should be going a little bit better. Maybe also Stu not getting as much damage out as you'd expect, but I mean, Tingz 32,000 damage right now. 33 minutes, EFG up about half health.
Fire Giant started. Let's listen in with the Gladiators as they take this fight.
That's a TP, that's a Serb. I'm hitting Serb, I'm hitting Serb.
Hitting Serb as well. Back up, back up, back up.
Serb jump.
Can we help Bellona?
I guess Freya. Oh,
Fuck!
Push their way left.
Got quiet there real quick in their comms. And it came off the back of a massive ult from Quig. The pull and the put-together mentality of the Kings just wipes the floor with the Gladiators around the FG. It gets silent. And they have to figure out what they want to do as the Kings march down mid into the Titan room, and they take game 1.
And if you listen to that last fight from the Glad's perspective, if you only were able to hear and not able to watch the fight, you would not be able to tell what's going on. Those comms were not great. You really didn't know what their plan was, kind of. It was mostly just calling out information, but no actual call was made. Are we taking the fight? Are we resetting? I think
Who
that's
to focus on?
Yeah, who to even hit?
I mean, you think, I think Jake at one point was just like, I got kiss on blank, and it's just like, that's nice to know, but nobody else was saying anything back.
That's the good information to have, but you need somebody to call all in, take the fight, hit this person, hit backline, hit frontline, whatever it is. Somebody needs to be calling. For the most part, that just wasn't there.
Actually, equates back, if you've been watching all day, you go back to the very beginning desk. One of the things that was highlighted were some of the comms from the Ferrymen, and very specifically Cyclone Spin over everybody else. And if you've ever talked to Cyclone Spin in person, very reserved. Like he's got his opinions, and like his personality still shines. He's a lot quieter than he was in those comms. And you get to hear that let him die, and then you get the inverse of that here, right? Dead silence. I noticed Kyrmi talking towards the end, but it took a little bit before it felt like some of the voices were found there for the Gladiators. And after an impressive early game, they're going to need to figure out a little bit more than just where their voices are at. We'll see what they're going to be able to do, but it's a 1-0 lead for the Kings here. We'll see if it continues or the Gladiators bounce back right after this.
Enough of the code switching, been hitting my soul, been on the ropes, I'm ready to grow, so get to know me. Keep your head up, I want you to grow with me. See this gold on me, want you to glow with me. Yeah, alright, okay, we get it. No contest. Wait, see this gold on me, serve up, nigga. You to glow with me. The world been dying, days is number, check the climate, I'm sick of it. They had brain scheme to get the riches quick. I played a long game with serene scene and I whip this quick. From the back room to the hearts, I'm in the thick of it. I grind too hard for y'all not to see me a star. Bitch, I'm raising a bar like they really pay me to talk. My life been in shambles, but I got handles. I'm finishing at the rim. I remind you time and again that I'm really him. Oh, you ain't know? This not just for the show, but bet you entertain. Anybody not for me is below me. Blow me, you in the way. I live my dreams, I got it locked, the master keeping on me. Back in the field, running audibles with the team. Everything I got out the mother, told my truth. I shake that fake shit, they praise you, then minimize you behind you. Just know I notice you. Stay woke, no joke, it really be the ones you closest to. Had to stop sleeping on myself like I ain't know the truth. Oh, this to me like it's really nobody code is this. And if you disagree, then you jaws and your claim get audited. Who you know do the beating and talking and write the harmonies. I'm really convinced there's nobody out here going hard as me. Wish well the dog that claimed belief in me so he could use me. Look at me now, you chose your route, I know you sick to see it. You talk a lot, all that flop, but that's not harming us. Capping your status, we back, ain't nobody raws us. To the ones that held me down for the count, look at what growth will do. I'm the kid from the cul-de-sac, feeling double sex with loot they pay to play my shit back. Ain't no way I'm going back until I'm fossil fuel to the flame, just like I'm supposed to do. Enough of the code switching, been hitting my soul, been on the ropes, I'm ready to grow, so get to know me. Keep your head up, I want you to grow with me. See this gold on me, want you to glow with me. Been hitting my soul, been on the ropes, I'm ready to grow, so get to know me. Keep your head up, I want you to grow with me. See this gold on me, want you to glow with me. I've been on a job, trying to take it far. I need that ROI, that done paid the cost. I'm all in on me, little baby, she agree, she really been here through the fall. She the only thing I need. I wanna be free, I know that they want me for my ideas so they can line their pockets. Don't hit me to tell me that you give a f about me. You don't even know nothing about me, trying to force me on your timeline. You know you need to stop it, I live for more than attention. Might not be your trending topic, put my worth in analytics. I admit that took a toll, I got addicted to scrolling. We know well that get toxic, I got caught comparing me to people I don't even know. They say it's lonely at the top, well maybe then I'll focus on things that's more important and let whoever think whatever and just keep it moving. These niggas won't work on themselves, they'd rather see you losing. You'll never see me losing. Enough of the code switching, been hitting my soul, been on the ropes, I'm ready to grow, so get to know me. Keep your head up, I want you to grow with me. See this gold on me.
I just think it was almost comedic. How the roster lock blocked. No one asked before it was the whole thing was done. Genetics. Apparently there was a car journey being made to pick up Genetics or Royd or both, and that like didn't happen because of the roster block. So I mean, it was for lack of a better word, a show.
When we found out the rosters were locked, I think the team's reaction was very, I guess you could say, tilted, because obviously all of us want to win the LAN. All of us want to win Masters, because obviously why would we be here? So when we found out that couldn't happen, I think everyone was like kind of annoyed and tilted at not just Sam, but kind of like the Warriors as a whole.
I can't imagine that they didn't think how good it would be to blindside take a support away from us 2 weeks before the tournament.
Make sure you check out the full video of the breakdown with Awesome Jig Forward and the entirety of the Oni Warriors, interviews from not just some of the players on the Warriors, but also, as you saw there, from the Camelot Kings. All that on youtube.com/SmitePro. We'll have all of that. So check out the Inside the SPL on there and watch the full video. I believe it's a 15-minute video, but it has a lot of really good discussions beyond there. The interviews with all the different players out there really gives you the full scope of how everything went down. And I'm just going to take one little thing from there. It's completely irrelevant to everything that went on, but I've never heard of a road trip described as a car journey, and I think that sounds way cooler. Like, yeah, I took a road trip up the East Coast. No, I took a car journey up the East Coast for a vacation. That sounds like a great one there. But
that's just Twig's finesse, his storytelling.
It really
his way
is.
of just flowing everything nicely, as he did in that game.
As he did there. It wasn't great to begin with, though, for the
Who
Camelot
cares about
Kings.
that? It's all about the car journey.
The front 15, it's not about the start of the trip, but the entire journey
exactly
that goes through for the Camelot Kings. Front 15, not so hot for them. At least the Gilded Gladiators really started getting some big leads there for Stu and for Kyrmi. But the back 20 is when we really see the Camelot Kings shine. They lose on at a fire time, they get stolen away, but this one really did feel like Kings control once we hit about that 15-minute mark.
And that's what you'd expect from a composition like this, right? Jarcorrr wasn't playing for early game. He was playing absolutely hard carry once he got online, which, surprise, he did. He got online. That's his first kill, and he kept getting more and more. Not to say that it was just Freya. I think that the CC that was being provided here from not only Quig, but also Variety was massive. And because of that, it makes your engage so much easier. I was talking about ease of engage a bit earlier, where if you've got 2 Guardians in the late game, you're going to have lockdown. You're going to have a fair bit of setup for your team. And I think because of that lockdown, you just had so much time. Oh my goodness, Yark. You just had so much time to just set up for yourself.
Yeah, this point here was like the good fight back from the Gladiators, and then Yark just puts out an insane amount of damage, nearly takes out 3 people by himself, gets a double kill, and then the rest of the team's able to clean up, and then this fight right here around the Fire Giant to seal the deal. This is when we got our listen-in with the Gilded Gladiators, and it wasn't much of a listen-in, it was a listening to silence, because once that first kill goes down, the entirety of the booth of the Gilded Gladiators just goes quiet. And I think in situations like this is where you would want the most discussion to be had. Sure, you're about to lose the game, you're moving on to the end beyond there, but this is where you would imagine you guys are starting to sit down now, start thinking about what you need to do for the next game, where did things go wrong, what needs to be worked on. So for them to go completely silent in just one ending team fight, one person goes down and all communication goes offline, does not bode well for the team moving forward in the set.
Yep, and I think that is going to be a big talking point for game number 2, because the Gilded Gladiators were able to get that early lead, right? That's step 1. But how do you relay that into your late game, right? How do you just translate that into actually sieging some Phoenixes, getting Fire Giant, etc.? You gotta hold on to that lead, and you can't make these little misplays that let a late game composition like the Camelot Kings get online. You can't be making those little errors. So the Gilded Gladiators, they could probably rerun a pretty similar strategy and just tighten up a little of those mess ups, and I imagine we could be looking at a different outcome.
We do jump into game number 2's picks and bans between the Gladiators and the Kings. Gladiators once again on the first pick side. Camelot Kings were on second pick in game number 1 as well. It was a Chernobog first pick for the Gladiators for their first game. Camelot Kings, their response was to pick up Ares and Freya, if I do remember that one correctly. So we'll see if it's similar. Well, not going to be, because the Kings actually banned the Ares away from themselves. So we'll have to see something different for the Camelot Kings in their duo lane. And I wonder if that maybe reinforces at least some of the picks that can come towards the Gilded Gladiators. I think that there were moments of brilliance for the Aphrodite, but unfortunate for Jake being an Aphrodite, once that ultimate goes down, you do lose out on a lot of your survivability, especially with all the anti-heal going through.
Yep.
And the Ares kind of bolstering that secondary problem factor because of it. Okay, we got rid of the Thor ultimate, no problem. We got past that. Oh, but there's a Cerberus ultimate. Oh, and there's an Ares ultimate. So now you take some of that AoE away.
So would you say the Ares was bolstering defenses?
He was removing their defenses.
Well, that's great. I love a little word.
I almost hit you with the remove some obstacles, those being the beads, but
yeah,
that's a Ganesha, and that wouldn't have worked as well.
No, I just, if you're gonna say bolster when talking about Ares, I'm gonna sneak in some defenses.
And you're right to do so.
And I appreciate you alley-oop, or I guess, yeah, you alley-oop me. That's what you did.
I gave you the alley-oop, you went for the slam dunk.
Bingo. But once again, we are in a position where there is those assassins open. Snoopy exhaled there. I'm wondering if he didn't want this Chernobog on his team. I'm wondering why. It seemed like right when he saw the Ama, it seemed like he was pretty upset about what his team would get in return. Chernobog looks good, yes. But I will say, I've been very hard on this Huang pick last game. Didn't hate it, right? And I think he was able to find some good damage. The safety that it provided, getting away from the set, which BMT was absolutely popping off on, right? So if you're able to go to the sky and sort of immune that damage or at least get away from it, I can see why Snoopy values that safety and still did decent damage. So, if I'm going to roast it, I got to also praise it when it is decent. Speaking of removing obstacles, Ganesh locked in here for the Camelot Kings, as well as, I don't think we have to hover this one too long. Yeah, I'm going to lock in that Freya every time. It's just the top 2 ADCs at the moment besides that Oleron, Chernobog, Freya. If it's available, yeah, you're going to take it.
And after a performance like Jarcorrr had, I'm not going to second guess. I'm not going to question it one bit. 26,500 damage. Only person on his team to outdo him in that regard would have been BigManTingz on the set. And then Snoopy on the other side by the Huang. But in that last little Phoenix Siege, and one of those highlights that we saw where we said, good lord, look at that damage. That's the benefit that a 6-slotted late game Freya brings to you, is they try and just immediately run you down. You pop 2-1, and you turn around and you fight right back. Jarcorrr did just that. And now we'll have the Ganesh by his side, at least for the laning phase. So now where the Gilded Gladiators go? Is Ratatoskr in this slot last time along with Aphrodite, but gonna pivot away from at least one of those for now. Set the lock-in for the Gladiators.
I'm wondering there's a world where you switch these up and you give Snoopy the Chernobog and send Stu in the duo lane to play that set, because you know, it's a pick that we've seen him play time and time again. Stu loves this set pick, and Snoopy has played a lot in the SCC, I remember. A lot of hunters in the mid lane as well, so could certainly pilot this Chernobog in the mid lane and throw a Charon into the mix. This is essentially the opposite of Aphrodite in my mind, right? You take a support that is just sort of stuck once you get involved in a fight. You're going to be the first one dead, that sort of situation. But Charon has so much movement. Awesome J can set up for his team. He can provide those sort of shields, but also be able to just leave at any given moment.
Now, I know that this was during Roll Star, so take it with a grain of salt. But that was when Stuart set the record for most kills on an individual player in an SPL match when he did play the set mid during that. It was immediately then taken by his now lane partner, Awesome Jake, in the very next match. Whereas 27 kills for Stuart and then 28 for Jake at that point. But again, that was Roll Stars, but it did at least show us that Stuart has that capability of the set. So I think you're right to bring up, maybe throwing that one into his hands, because he has shown in the past that he does have a prowess on this god. Locking that alongside the Charon, and then Artemis on the opposite side. And we've seen, and now I almost have to say that we've seen 3 styles of Artemis builds. We've seen the Bluestone Transcendence ability Artemis. We've seen your Leather Cowl style of play with your standard Shred. But then we also saw just recently, you build Bluestone if you throw her in the mid lane, and then you just build the Shred anyway. So we've seen a few different styles of the Artemis play, and all 3 of them seem to have their own merits and strengths.
As far as I'm concerned, as long as you're getting Bountiful Bow and full cooldown, you can build Artemis however you want, because late game, as long as you have the Bow online and your full CDR, suppress the Insolence on a 3.5 second cooldown. That's your insane poke. That's your slow. You can use your movement speed to catch up or to run away. It's just so nice. So as long as that's happening, I've got no problems here. It's got a fantastic matchup into the Chernobog. Anytime he's in the wall, you set a little trap. You say, where you dashing out, bro? I've just blocked your escape. You're guaranteed dashing out into the trap. And of course, the set as well, right? Anytime you're worried about a set diving you, you drop Tusky, you keep on running. However, I do think if Stu is taking the set and Chernobog's in the mid lane, there's not going to be too much diving in Artemis, right? It's going to be all about set diving the Freya. You know, going for poke, trying to force out one banish. If the banish misses, Freya has to ult, like guaranteed. Set can absolutely run down a Freya if that banish is gone. So I really would like to see this set go duo lane. I think it would work out a lot better.
Well, second wave of bans concludes with Bellona, Ratatoskr, Thor, and Cerberus. For those 4, opens up a Lancelot now for the Camelot Kings. And Lancelot has gone over to CaptainTwig both times when the Kings have picked this god up. And it's gone over to Haddix one time in the solo lane. So, still some mix between jungle and solo. Do you have a preference, kind of given what we've already seen from the Camelot Kings based on what's been drafted for the Gladiators? Do you have a preference on where this Lancelot might slot into?
It's just going to Twig. I mean, he just loves that god, right? As far as preference goes, I'd prefer it in the jungle, and I'm 90% sure it's going into the jungle. Variety, to me, does not seem like someone who wants to go towards a pick like that. This is interesting, though, because we've already said that I want Stu to take the set, give that Chernobog over to Snoopy in the mid lane. So we got the Zhong solo, and then Kyrmi taking the Pele. That's how I would go through these picks, and that's what I imagine would come through. It's just all in, though, right? They have all in. Pop 4, go. And to be honest with you, Charon and Zhong, I bet have some great synergy there. That fear into the ghost is going to be a good time. Throw a Pele into the mix. So much AoE. Should be interesting. This is an interesting composition the Gladiators have cooking up. Definitely not easy to execute on, but if you can get a true 5v5 team comp and actually just click ults together, this could be nasty.
Then, rounding out the top 5, or the bottom 2 in this case, for the Camelot Kings, along with the Lancelot, is Baron Samedi. Now, we've seen all kinds of different Barons over the course of his competitive history. He started out as a mid laner, did an insane amount of damage, and then received some nerfs, got tuned down a little bit, so he moved over to the support role for a time. Then there was a period of, I believe it was last year, where it was Baron versus Hades solo lane. That was the go-tos over in solo. Now it's been kind of quiet for Baron. It's kind of up in the air. We saw Final K play him just recently. Had a great performance on there, ends with a 3.8 KDA on that pick. So with this Baron, to kind of round out the Camelot Kings, does this maybe shore up any of the missing pieces that the Kings had in their current draft?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Baron is just a counter pick to get good lane pressure. If you're up against an immobile mage, like I believe Final K pulled it out into the outwash, right? And now you're picking it into a Zhong Quig. So there's no way for Zhong to get away from life of the party. He's just going to pop beads, pop Aegis, or, just pop the ultimate and hope you're able to live. It's not great for solo kills. Both of these mages are just so tanky, but the difference maker is CaptainTwig nearby when this is happening, right? Is Kyrmi nearby when this is happening? That's going to make the big difference. So it's going to come down to ward coverage as well as just holding on to relics. I'm curious if we're going to see teleports, right? I think Baron has a little bit more safety with that CC immunity, so Variety doesn't have to get teleport, but I'm thinking Kana can't get teleport, right? You need Blink and then beads or Aegis. Usually it's the Aegis because you can still pop the ultimate through Aegis, but also there's a lot of CC that the Camelot Kings might want to go to, so it's going to be a difficult relic battle there for Kana in the solo lane.
For the Gilded Gladiators, though, Charlie, has this composition kind of corralled itself into a similar spot from Game 1? Game 1 was we need to win the game early, and then we just need to keep that lead going. Is this a similar style here for the Gilded Gladiators? Do they have some better merits if this game ends up going a bit late and they don't have that lead?
Yeah, I don't think this is end-all, be-all. Freya just hard carries and wins. You can't get to late game, but they still do want to get a lead early and hold on to it, right? When you've got a team fight composition like this, you're not afraid of the Fire Giant fight, but if you can avoid it entirely, you're going to take that trade, right? If you don't have to juke around Freya auto attacks and sort of just say, hey, we're so tanky we can just dive her for free, that's the gameplay style you're going to go for. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's play through solo for a bit or just entirely ignore it and focus on making sure Jarcorrr is uncomfortable. That's got to be the game plan.
Jarcorrr was definitely a hard carry once it came late game for the Kings. We'll see if the Gladiators can shut that down and find themselves a win here against the Camelot Kings, or will the Kings go up 2-0? Let's find out in game number 2.
Thanks so much, J-Mac and Trelly. It's Gore, it's inbound. And it is Doug giving us the views. As once again, we get to see, maybe most devastatingly, Jarcorrr reprise his role on the Freya, which was something that was solid. Snoopy, this time, who will be on the set. Stuart reprising his role on the Chernobog. Closer odds this time, 77-23. So a few more people believing in the Gladiators. But Kana took a tower shot and is going to have to go back. I guess he's got plenty of time.
That was a couple tower shots. What is he doing out there?
Yeah, there's no E-set, so
yeah,
I can't.
That's what I was looking for at first. I was like, E-set? Where is she?
I'm most passives not affected by deaths. Nope. So maybe he just wanted to see. Maybe in a world. Okay, so there's like an alternate world where the rest of the Gladiators are like real close by. He goes up, takes a couple hits, and it's a bait to try and pull someone in for a kill. Nobody was, though, so, maybe he's just having some fun.
I was also thinking maybe Kama, trying to get like a Kama pool in mid lane for a fight happening there, but there's no Kama either.
There's no Kama.
Unfortunately, really weird. Nothing comes from it. Now we got the game
it's
starting.
It's unimportant, actually, as it turns out.
It really doesn't matter. Now looking at the comps, the Glads have a pretty obvious style that they're looking for this game. Basically, run it down. We are diving. Not a thought of backing up. This is an all-in comp. And then the comp that they're opting to dive into has a Baron, a Ganesha, and an Artemis. That is not an easy call to make, to be able to dive into a comp like that. Ganesha is one of the hardest gods to actually fight into. Jake actually taking a lot of damage in duo. Nothing too much coming out, down to about 200 health. A lot of damage already happening over there. But late game, this Glad's comp is going to have to really be on it, because that is not an easy comp to dive.
I've got to give you, and this is something that, for chat, this is going to be extraordinarily subtle, but also you might learn something here, because the last time I mentioned this, people learned something. But a shout out to you for being able to see the 2 bars and call the 200 health like that quickly. Yeah. For Jake. For anyone who doesn't know, each one of those segments that you see on like the health bar, whether red or blue, or if you're colorblind, probably some other colors that are in
bars.
there. Yeah, the bars. Each one of those is 100, right? So it's a very quick way to guess. That being said, sometimes, who knows, like more than 2 or 3, it's not worth counting.
That's when you just make the call. He's one shot.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right?
the normal call out.
You know what? And now I need to ask you, because I hear that. I feel like we hear that all the time. We're here in comms where someone's like, he's 1, and the dude's got like 2/3 of his health bar still.
Yep.
How, like, why is that so common?
I have no idea. It's such a bad call.
Because he's not. He's very much not one shot.
Literally 2 health, both relics, ult still available. He's one, he's barely out. It's such a bad call. I don't know why it's made, but it's made. And it's probably something that shouldn't be made. But yeah, I don't even know where it comes from, why it happens.
And it's league-wide. It's not like there's not even a single player to harp on. It's just, you'll hear it. Maybe if we do a listen-in later, you'll hear a he's one, and you'll look over and see 2/3 of his health bar still in the green. It's always an interesting time, especially when you see it. But right now, as you'd mentioned, it's pretty much going to be up to, I guess maybe as the desk mentioned, up to the Gladiators try and maybe choose their own fate. First 15 minutes last time around, very controlling, domineering, and you've got Kyrmi on Pele, who feels like a god who can really get her hands dirty.
Yeah, I like Kyrmi on the Pele because we see this Glads comp and we want them to get involved early. The Kings don't really have that option early in most sides of the map. I think solo they have some opportunity. Chnnahh has to go that beads because of this matchup into Baron. He has to get too close. He doesn't have that dash to escape the life of the party. And expect a lot of this in solo lane. A lot of abilities thrown out. A lot of abilities hopefully landing, but a lot of just trading over here. Relic trading, ult trading, ability trading. And then Twig and Kyrmi. When we see these solo laners play these unsafe gods, that means it's a volatile matchup. Usually, we talked about this last time, where you have those warriors in solo lane. You don't really want to visit that. Maybe you get a blue buff for them, but you're mostly playing for them for late game. Opposite side, when you have double mage in solo lane, it's a lane you have to play through, because if you don't help them out, they will die a lot.
And like you said, Baron maybe even having a good team fight, at least against the Gladiators, but like you said, lane-wise, sometimes that can change. He's not known for his mobility. He's known for his parties. I've heard that they're wonderful. Still haven't gotten an invite. Twig got an invite to a small brawl on the left-hand side of the mid lane. A little bit of damage thrown towards Snoopy. None really returned. Also, the Artemis. You know, we saw this, the Bluestone into Transcendence, very ability-heavy. And I know we were talking about it. We'll have to hold that thought, though. Kyrmi through the Dharmic Pillars, damage, CC, lockdown. Quig is here. Body blocks are good. Wow. Where are you gonna go? It's into the grayscale Twig with first blood, and it's an early one at that.
And a really good rotation by Twig there. He actually forces Kyrmi to walk mid. Twig gets off the body block, and then Quig, with the nice setup, gets the kill. Kyrmi can't ult out, gets one shot. First blood for the Kings, about 1,000 gold. And that's Quig highlight right there.
Yeah.
Twig makes a good play, obviously, but if Quig's not there, there's no kill potential.
The Dharmic Pillars, the body blocks, I mean, honestly, as a support player, it's maybe everything you wanted. And I'm always really interested, you know, we've watched it. I recommend go watching the doc on the change, right? Dropping and losing genetics, I guess, really, for the Kings. As the Warriors picked him up, they dropped Jake, so, you know, 2 of the supports actually, and 2 the teams affected by those changes here. Variety getting affected by Kyrmi. Oh my god, the damage between the 2 of them. Chnnahh gets the kill. Twig shows up. Twig has no ult. I don't think he can do much about it. What a insane burst between the 2 Gladiators.
Twig blinks in on the horse, and instantly the last hit of Zhong ult just knocks him off the horse, so he blinks in just for nothing. But nice play by Kyrmi and Chnnahh. No ult on Variety. Very low survivability. Baron got that nice buff to his ultimate. Used to be 35% mitigation when he's channeling it. It is now 50%. Unfortunately, if that ult is not available, he is very squishy. He has 15 protections of each, no health, playing in the short lane. And as you just saw, Zhong has a lot of damage. Pele have a lot of damage too.
And that's one thing to think about. Actually, Bancroft rush for Chnnahh here as well, so like damage is there. It's got a lot of power to it. And do you like that? I mean, you've got Variety stacking, right? He's playing for the late game, and we've talked about some of the team fight. Book bought by Chnnahh, starting to read, unsure where he's going to end up going with it. But do you like the Bancroft's like starter?
I like that he's starting to read, but doesn't know what he's reading. Yeah, I like the Bancroft as a starter. It's a really good spike item, and at this point, anti-heal is negligible. You have the little bit on Baron, and that's just about it. And I think if he doesn't opt for the Bancrofts, he gets out-traded a little bit more than he wants to be. So I think it's more of a 1v1 matchup thing. And then, as you see there, if he does get blinked on by Twig, and maybe Twig looks for more of an all-in, and Variety's there also, Bancroft gives you that 1v2 potential at this point, so he's just that much more volatile.
wanted to see, and maybe we will see, Jake whooped and then grabbed by Quig. There's Dharmic Pillars.
Good silence.
Good silence and good rotation.
Wow.
Goes Twig, and there comes a kill one more time, and it's on the jungler 2-0. And Twig making his presence felt across the map, but the duo lane, and unfortunately for Kyrmi a little bit earlier, the jungler as well, suffering from the fate of Twig's lance.
And this Ganesh so far has made such a big impact. Both kills courtesy of the Ganesh, getting the silence out, stopping them from getting away. A lot of poke on a Snoopy, but he is just fine. Set one of the safer gods in the game, and especially in this match, going to be one of the safest gods. He's also got that sigil for a little bit of extra survivability. Artemis ult down in mid. Snoopy's beads actually force a lot of all-in potential here.
That safety might come into question here. The chase is on. You do lose Ting, so it's 1-for-1. Quig still has Twig and a little bit of help, but you've got a rotation from Stuart. And it's going to be Twig instead who dashes forward and still gets the damage. Kyrmi put down for a second time. A great play by the jungler on the Kings to pick up a second kill. 4 for himself. A second death for Kyrmi. And a small, but still manageable, lead for the Kings.
And that was a 3v4 fight. Stu actually ulted into mid there, and the Kings just outright won that, a 2-for-2. Well, 2-for-2 is not necessarily a win, but when you think about... Actually, that was a 2-for-1.
Yeah, they lose
yeah,
Tings
2-for-1.
Pick up Snoop and Kyrmi.
And then Yark doesn't even rotate there, so that's just an outright win for the Kings. And that Artemis, I mean, we saw the potential right there for how much burst she'll be bringing out. If you don't deal with that boar towards the late game, that bluestone is going to be spread all over the place. And then same with that suppress the insolence, as we see here, just poking down. A lot of damage that is consistently coming out.
Well, so we were talking about how annoying slows are as well last
yes.
game, so you're going to feel that a lot if you're the Gladiators here. I don't think I ever got to the point, it's not as relevant here, but disarms, when you're playing something that is auto-attack base, that's the only time you ever notice a disarm, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world at that moment.
Yes, or you're
so
waiting
that's
for
what Bellona can do.
Or you're waiting for like a polyproc and Bellona disarms you and you like don't even get to use your poly.
Luckily for Jarcorrr, last game didn't have to deal with it too often. This game doesn't have to deal with it at all, right? Jarcorrr not playing into the Bellona and is going to be a little more comfortable here. And it is a pretty good experience. We talked about the kills. We talked a little bit about the gold, but 11-9 right now. Twig with a 2-level lead. Kyrmi maybe going to try to put that up to question. Variety goes for the stun. Still a 2v1. The damage is there. That's going to be a nice kill. Gets Kyrmi up to level 10. And it looks like the move speed is going to be enough to get out of there. Jarcorrr forced to ult on the other side of the map to disengage. Dodges out some damage from Jake. Maybe a much-needed kill for the Gladiators, and specifically for Kyrmi to get back on track.
Yeah, it's a good rotation for Kyrmi. Gets that kill, picks it up. A lot of damage on the Variety, and as we've seen now, this Baron is not safe. Even when it has the ult, if you walk too far out, there's a lot of kill potential and a lot of damage that both Kana and Kyrmi have. Variety now going into that tier 2 Genjis would be the assumption. A little bit of magical defense, stops Kana's damage a little bit. Ganesh actually all down in mid. Snoopy, no beads. Wow, good burst, good play. Again, another play around this Ganesh. The Kings just seem so comfortable with this pick.
And honestly, it's one of the things when we were talking about it, and if you've looked at, I think the Kings right now are looking at Kyrmi, who looked like a free meal in mid for a little bit there. Instead, maybe the free meal is something on left. Variety is rotated over towards mid. You've got the rest of the Kings in this area. Twig dismounted. Quig, no ult, so maybe it's not going to end up being as big of a play as it feels like it could. Can turn back towards the elephant, which is the Quig here. You know, we talked a lot about, oh, what is Genetics going to do for the Warriors? Oh, what are we going to get to see then with Jake on the Gladiators? Right now what we're seeing is Twig take a lot of poke, deal a little bit of poke. Tings rotating around the back with a wraparound. It looks like Jake is the target. A couple more autos. That's all you need. Good dash, good rose. And it's going to create some space, but not enough. You still lose out on Tings, and a favorable trade for the Gladiators if they can get out. Snoopy, 2/3 health. Not going to get chased. Going to be just fine. Still 6-4. The Kings come up short in that one.
Snoopy able to sneak in, get that kill onto Big Man. Fight actually breaks out again. Quig's ult is back up. Quig no ult. Twig no ult. Quig with a lot of peel. Twig ends up getting out. Stu cleans him up. Quig now going to be put down also. Unfortunately, really good play. Almost gets them both out. I don't know how are you supposed to play by play Quig and Twig. You just
you just hope.
fumble the words.
Yeah, you just hope. It's like when you got Chiron and Charon, and you just kind of hope. Twig, I admire it. Got a lot of damage onto Kyrmi, and then Quig was real close to pick up the damage, almost like maybe 2 seconds off of a cooldown. Who knows? From actually getting the kill and causing something. That's actually a huge play for the Gladiators compared to what we've been talking about.
Yes, and that's like Chernobog power right there. Just able to ult in, clean up that kill. Thought you were out. Probably were out if there's almost any other god in that ADC role. Unfortunately, Charon can ult in, secure that kill, and then Quig was put out of position a little bit also. Kana taking a little ult here.
You got Twig. Maybe it could be a little bit more than just the ult. Forces the ult out of the Zhong. Healing's going to be there thanks to Bancroft and a little bit of Zhong himself. Twig goes in. Twig smacks him down. It comes out pretty straightforward. Kyrmi, though, is here. Has the ult again. No blink. So he'd have to go in the old-fashioned way. But Twig backed up. So Variety is alone. Rightly walks into the jungle. I'm kind of watching the minimap. Where is he going to go with it? And does Kyrmi have the ability? I think if you don't get rooted, stunned there, maybe you could ult for him and try to get the kill. Instead, it's just a little bit of pressure, and Kyrmi making sure his presence is still known.
This is probably one of the best games we've seen from Twig in a while. A lot of damage actually onto Jake, getting all in, silenced by the Ganesh. This Ganesh, again, another kill around this Ganesh. Jake is not able to play the game how he wants to into this Ganesh. He gets too many of his abilities caught. He tries to bait out a lot. And with that pick, the King's able to walk to the Gold Fury. Nobody even close by the Glads, and they opt for the trade, getting that Pyro. 1 and gold for Pyro traded in favor of the Kings. Slight gold, 700. But this Ganesh, this is like the most magnum opus of the Kings playing around this Ganesh, and just Quig is doing a lot.
And that's something, what I was trying to touch on was Quig specifically. And what he had brought for the Hounds and what we had seen them, of course, them still able to take one win earlier off the Ferryman and a 3-1 loss. But Quig now on the Kings, it feels like, yes, it's definitely going to be different from Genetics. And admittedly, as a rookie, it's going to be a little wild going into a team with players like Variety and Twig and Tings, even Jarcorrr, because at least 3 of those guys have been around forever, and then Jarcorrr is known by so many as like one of the best mechanical players, if not the best mechanical player in maybe the world.
Yeah, and he's a 2-time, and you have a bunch of these other players that just got their first Worlds.
Yeah.
They're just these
and you're just like this
champions.
kid who was in the SEC. Like, I'd be nervous, and obviously it's not affecting him because he's playing so well, as you mentioned. 7 assists on the Ganesh. Can't talk about the no kills because that's a whole thing in and of itself for Ganesh. It's passive. I get it, guys. That's why it was so hype yesterday when we got a Ganesh kill. I'm really excited to see, though, what he's going to be able to continue to do. I think that this has been a good pickup for the Kings, and with some growing pains, they're getting back into the groove.
Yeah, they're starting to look comfortable again. I know this is only the 2nd time we've seen the Kings, which is a little, it doesn't take a lot to play good for 2 games. It's something you have to stretch over the entire phase, but these first 2 sets have been fantastic. Also, I want to point out, Twig 7-1 on this Lancelot.
That's a lot of kills.
This is one of those gods I think of when I think of Twig, where he will put on a performance a lot of the times he plays in Variety. Actually, he's getting gone on by Kyrmi. Aegis is out. Kyrmi taking the trade. Twig rotates in. Not enough damage, but the Chernobog is the Chernobog ults in, gets the kill. 1-for-1 trade. Variety, Kyrmi both go down. And this, again, strength of the Chernobog, able to go to that side of the map, get the trade there. And this is a good response by the Glads, also taking that 1-for-1. And instead of Snoopy just sitting mid, he actually opts to rotate the left lane to clear up that wave. And so there's not just missed farm on the map, which is something that we talked about before. The Warriors do that really, really well. And it's cool to see teams finally picking that up also, because it's just something that the Warriors just do better than everyone else. And now other teams are starting to do that too.
Especially when you have that global ult, right? Like, it's like, immediately from the call that Stu's not going to be over there. It keeps things going. Although it is still a small lead, at least in the jungle, right? Supports are even. Actually, small leads, maybe big lead. You look at Kana, he's 3 levels up on Variety right now. So Kyrmi's presence in right is being felt. Now you might get to feel that presence elsewhere. Shows up, trapped, and that actually might just kill this one. Kana rotates in, pretty tanky. Oh my god! The damage from Chernobog onto Tingz in the blink of an eye. There's no way to respond to that. The Aegis couldn't be used. And a great kill from the Gladiators just with a simple rotation.
And it was such good pathing by BMT there to get away from that Charon ult. That ult was following you all the way back to your Phoenix if you opt to walk that way. He opts to walk towards mid, so he jukes out that ult. Unfortunately, waiting there is the level 17 Zhong, who nearly one-shots him. And as you said, Aegis going to be used. Looking for the dive onto Jarcorrr, maybe.
Shots good from Jarcorrr. Actually might turn this one around. Rethink this engagement. He's chasing you down. The hasten ring, but didn't work. Has the pulse. Decide, do you want Snoopy? Do you want the Chernobog? Jarcorrr gets one. Twig is going to get the other. They pick up both kills. Twig, come on, you can't let me down here, man. They managed to get the set. Twig trying to close the gap. Gets in, has to play carefully. Couple of crits are true. Stu makes that one closer than it should be. But it is still 2 kills for the Kings, and they're going to try to get a little more. Kyrmi forced to use his ult as a disengage away from Tingz. And the Kings are not letting the Gladiators off easy with these fights.
And there was almost, you know, Stu getting that trade on a Twig. Twig had ult the entire time. He had the ult the entire time. He just didn't want to use it to save it for something over here. So you could just tell the Kings are looking for a fight on this side of the map. Chernobog already down to half health. Pyro under half. Just these two contesting, and Twig blinks in.
Chernobog already relatively low. There's the ult from Twig, and it gets some damage. Maybe locks down Chernobog. There's the Dharmic Pillars. That should help shred through, and they finally get a massive, massive kill. 40 seconds without Chernobog gives a huge advantage over to the Kings. And at this point, it's worth touching. 18.5 in, 12-8. Second beacon of the game. The Kings are going to stand with 4 on top of it. The gold is hundreds right now, separating them. So nothing too crazy in terms of lead, unless you can get an insane kill. Jarcorrr trying to use the hasten, trying to use the chase, can't find the shots. So great jukes from Stuart to stay alive. Maybe keeps Jarcorrr here too long. Kyrmi blink forward, comes in for some damage, but maybe here's the turnaround. One more time, the Freya damage. You have to be careful, and you've got the rest of the Kings in the neighborhood. Jake is low, forced to fall back. Kyrmi low, forced to fall back, and now Snoopy hung out to dry. The damage is there. And Kyrmi, he comes back in, but Aegis from Tingz keeps him alive. And keeps him going. Kyrmi shut down for his trouble, and the fight is not done. Jake killed off at the very end, and Tingz again narrowly avoids death. Chernobog moving forward. Stuart ulting in. They know they have to get something. They need to pull it back, but they just can't. The Kings get out of there, and they keep all 5.
These fights are on a razor's edge where we're talking one more ability, one more auto, and we're talking about a completely different fight. But the Kings balance on that edge perfectly, play it near perfectly, everyone gets out, they pick up 3 kills, lining up for the Primal Fury, both Twig and Jarcorrr. Free Primal after that fight. This 2k gold lead is going to be ballooning up to 3k. Still not all that much after a 20-minute portion. But XP, other than solo lane, I think we can highlight solo lane. Chernobog has got a 3-level lead there.
Yeah.
But other than that, we have a 2-level lead in jungle. Twig 12, 1, and 2, a part of 14 of 15 kills. And he's actually a huge shutdown right now. Maybe they look to do something here.
Yeah, they got a shutdown on him earlier. They're looking for it. Forces the ult. Twig's going to get out of there. The shield helps him out. And the Dharmic Pillars from Quig has to take just as much credit for peeling there as anything else. Poor Quig, speaking of. I mean, he's invested so heavily now in the relics, as well as being able to upgrade. Well, I guess his recipe finished, right, at this point. But he's been lacking on the items otherwise. It is purely the silence, the ult, and the play from the Ganesha that is giving its utility right now.
I mean, this is all Ganesh needs at this point. A few auras, some cooldown, compassion, and he's feeling like an OP god. And he's playing like an OP god. Quig on this Ganesh, a fantastic game. I know we've kind of beaten it into the ground, but it really is a great game. And those supports don't always get all that praise, so when we see it, we got to point it out, especially Gore and I. We've got to point it out.
Especially, I mean, look, 12 kills for Twig, but 11 assists for Quig. Like, he's been there for just as many and setting him up. And Twig He's going to try and make that 12
no
a little
ult.
bit higher. Has to play carefully. Still no ult. Still a lot of damage. Stu is absolutely smacking him. Forces the beads just to avoid the slow. Rest of the fight up near the tier 1 on right. Damage is trading back and forth, but Variety is low. And it could be the opening that Kyrmi needs. The ult used, and it spreads it out. Finally help it pick up another kill. This one goes over towards Jake. Variety's low. Auto's true. And Stuart finds the win for this fight. At least picking up 2 of the Kings, maybe looking for a little more. Twig slowly looping around. Has the ult, can't really make it into the fight. Quig has to stay alive. The Gladiators mounted up outside the tier 2 on right, getting in. Twig going through the back, looking for more. It's going to find Kyrmi with the leap, and the dash back gets the damage spread and pulls one back in their favor. Meanwhile, Jarcorrr chunks everyone else's health bar and makes the Glads rethink their positioning.
And I think you can tell who on the Kings is putting out a lot of damage in these team fights. When Twig was not in the fight, hugely in favor of the Gladiators. And as soon as Twig walks back around after running from Snoopy for about 30 seconds, he gets back into the fight and he 500 damage through 4 different people, hops off the horse, another 500 damage, takes out Kyrmi. And that fight could have been a lot worse for the Kings. But Jarcorrr, in a very strong spot, puts out a lot of damage. He was already level 20 in that fight with the starter. And I think he kind of peeled out the rest of the team. Game is just about even. We've got 6 kills in favor of the Kings. Full build on just about nobody right now, but everybody's getting kind of close to that point. Some level 20, some starters coming through. This next few minutes, we'll be saying a lot.
Do you like this Thebes pickup for Variety? Like, we've seen Thebes, actually, from Solo or Troll, you go a couple weeks, he was playing it a ton. But this is a lot later than I'm used to seeing a Thebes, so it's going to take a little while to do the Thebes thing.
This is a Solo or Troll special still, where even after 4th, 5th items, sometimes he'll just buy into it. And it's because you get to this late game portion, and it's still one of the most powerful items in the game.
And it's helping Variety out immensely. They just take care of Kana, taking out the trash like it's nothing. The Kings help deal with at least one, but now the pressure is on. Tier 2 in left, put down overall by Stu. Tier 2 in mid, taken down by Kyrmi and Snoopy. Fire Giant started up, and actually a very easy engage from the Kings. They just picked that one up, and now the ult is there from Twig. Do they want the rest of the fight, though? Shield knocked away instantly. Tingz leading the way. Does not seem like he's going to be able to find the spacing for the ult to try and get the stuns spread out. It's a 4v5 still. Fire Giant on 5 for the Kings. They're going to start assaulting the tier 2 tower in mid.
And just looking at this player damage, you see this grouping of Glad's players. Stu, 13k. You have Jake at 12k. And then you see Kana and Snoopy down at 8 and 6k respectively. It seems to be that that's kind of the problem for the Glads at this point. Snoopy on that Huang was putting out so much damage and have so much of an impact. In this game, 6,000 damage, 1, 4, and 3. The bright side is you don't play set for this early portion of the game. But this is this next 4, 5, 6 minutes, and when EFG spawns, this is the important part for Snoopy. He's going to have to start putting in a big amount of work to be able to make this set like worth that high pick.
Luckily, you've got the Zhong Quig, so if it comes down to Phoenix defenses, at least you still have a mage, right? Although maybe not the best case scenario that for most of his clear, he needs to be in the wave to try and make it work. And that's going to be the issue. Kings, they back, they spend. You were talking about full builds and things like that just a second ago and how we weren't quite there. It looks like we're getting some pretty massive improvements. Quig, maybe the most of all, was just a huge gap compared to everybody else in his build now, up to the tier 2 talisman with the sovereignty. But it's the setup that I think I want to ask you about the most. Titans are going to be going down left, which means it will be met with the Order Titan a little bit sooner than the Chaos Titan, at least with where Jarcorrr is. Tier 2. Do you step up and try to defend there if you're the Gladiators, or are you falling back just to the Phoenix?
You're falling back. There's so much all-in potential that the Kings have if you step too far forward, and you are very reliant on blinks. Your poke trade is not all too strong, but I like them kind of slowing this down as much as they can, especially because they see variety in right.
Twig spotted out on his mount. Stu comes forward along with Jake, trying to find Quig. It's going to be a 1v1 in the jungle. Quig is winning that one pretty heavily. Kyrmi has to use the ult for the disengage variety. Loops around a trap, actually locks down Kyrmi, and that opens up the opportunity. Twig goes forward, the damage is there, and Variety cleans it up, gets rid of one, while Hardcore gets rid of another two in the blink of an eye, and now a whoop onto Jake means this
Silence.
tier 2 defense becomes a lot easier, or it should be easier for the Kings. Their siege as they knock it down left side, tier 2. And guess who's here? It's the Chaos Titan as they start to aggress onto the Phoenix. It could be the end of the game. 30 seconds. No Kyrmi, no Kana. Snoopy, you called it out. Second to bottom damage, has to make a big play here. Stu deleted off the board by the Kings. They march into the Titan room, and I don't see any set clones here getting any job done. The Titan is low. Snoopy gets turned on, and the Kings are gonna win game 2.
And even now, looking at the player damage, Snoopy was still only at about 9,000. We spoke at the beginning of the game. It's not going to be an easy comp to dive. A lot of self-peel, Ganesh, a lot of peeling, and it just didn't look like the Zhong Quig were able to get as much done in those team fights. The Zhong really dominated lane. He had a huge XP lead, but didn't translate to that team fight.
And I'm having flashbacks, maybe war flashbacks if you're Variety, to how quickly that first gank where his health bar just disappeared instantly. And it felt like the Zhong Quig was providing a lot of that, and then it just didn't anymore. And all of a sudden, Variety's having huge, impactful plays. Obviously, we talked a lot about Quig for good reason throughout that entire game, because it just feels like every step of the way, Quig was providing nothing but benefits for his team. Starting from first blood, right, with body blocks and Dharmic Pillars, to the very end with silences and also Dharmic Pillars still. It just feels like the team really kind of coalesced, and then like Twig went like 15-1 or something, which that's pretty good. Yeah. Just a little bit of a benefit for them. It's a great game from the Kings, and it needs work from the Gladiators. We'll find out if they can turn it around, or if this one's going to end in 3 right after this.
She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business out my mind. Have a treetop, swinging my visa, put up a cool. With the party, sipping her coffee, epic up. With a clear eye, she too weird, I like a tattoo. Then it funny, but I wonder, hey, how many times can you say no winner than true? How many times, baby? How low can you go to keep ducking your one baby boo? How low can you go, baby? I wanted some land, I wanted some nigga move. But you on the train and I want this going to chew. She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business out my mind. It's a tea time, leaning like in pizza. Put them knees down, squeeze it like a breeze on. Got the teeth done, had to fill the crease up. Saw the sneakers by the door and realized it was time to go. Weighted blankets couldn't come for me. I'll need more to ever catch a seat. I keep wondering what I didn't see. She a damn good thief. She got treats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business on my mind. I get a chance to make amends. I did the dance, I switch my lens to try and glance how it makes sense. I play pretend, this is the end, I get a chance to make amends. I did the dance, I switch my lens to try and make amends. She got cheats, she got smiles, she got business on the side. She got treats for them guys when a baby out of town. Got cheats, got size, funny business on her mind. She's so pleased with her life, mind her business
Game number 2 between the Camelot Kings and Gilded Gladiators goes to the Camelot Kings. It's J-Max Trelli here to break down game number 2, but Joe, it doesn't feel like there's too much to break down. This felt like the Captain Quig show, and yes, it's the amalgamation of the damage that CaptainTwig brought for the team and the defense that Quig was able to provide as well. Put those two together, and you've got a winning formula here for the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, it's very easy to get distracted in the high kills that Twig was able to get and just say, you know, it was the Twig show, but I'm glad that you got to throw Quig in there as well, because I would say the majority of these replays we're about to watch, I'm going to assume there's going to be some very solid Dharmic pillars being thrown up as well. It was always that combo of the CC that Quig could provide to sort of force these dashes, force these relics, and then, of course, CaptainTwig closing out. I gotta say it. I said it during picks and bans. I really would have preferred to see Snoopy and Stuart switch roles there in the sense of, you know, take the set into the duo lane and get that Chernobog into mid. I feel like it would have fit them both so much better. Didn't end up working out. Did not see much from the set, unfortunately. And of course, it just didn't seem like the duo lane really got anything rolling for them as well. When CaptainTwig's popping off like this, I mean, 12 kills at 19 minutes. You know, it's very impactful, number one, but number two, it's also very hard to exist as a carry when this is going on. And, you know, the casters highlighted it. Kind of had a good time in lane. It was once he left lane that was really the issue, right? You show up as a full damage Zhong to these team fights, and you're not able to do that damage, and it's not the greatest look.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite in there for Variety. Once Variety was in the lane, not a fun time. Getting bullied out by a Zhong, Queen, and Pele, not a great time over in solo. As soon as Variety gets to leave that lane and then join in those team fights with the rest of his squad, looks a lot stronger for him. He gets to have a little bit more fun out in those little matchups there. A 14-1-5 game for CaptainTwig on the Lancelot. Really showcasing some of the new buffs that came his way. It really does kind of seem like just those couple of small adjustments he got, a little bit sooner on his dash, gives him more accessibility, more mobility in a team fight, but also now having that extra MP5 just at base makes it to where he's not just running out of mana after his first couple of rotations of abilities. So CaptainTwig really able to showcase the Lancelot here in game number 2. So for the Gilded Gladiators, I think now the question I pose to you is, Charlie, where do you go from here? Because the all-in style draft they did in game number 1 worked out for a little bit, then fell apart about 15 minutes in. Similar style of composition here in game 2. Didn't really work out well at the beginning, and then never got a chance to get to late game. So what is the option here for the Gilded Gladiators as we jump into picks and bans for game 3?
I mean, I'm thinking the early game is still where they should focus. That's no different, right? Because they were able to win early and then translate that into not being able to win late game. You'd think, oh, just draft for late game. But if you get rolled over and you never get to late game and it's 19 minutes and Twig's got 12 kills, that doesn't work either. So you have to win early game. That's almost a guarantee at this point. If the Gilded Gladiators want to win their first set, they can't count on misplays, right? They have to get proactive themselves. So starting with early pressure is going to be key. How do they translate that into a late game team fight? It's hard to say, because I truthfully think their team fights, their fire giant pulls, their fights in the jungle are the core issue here. Whether that's a lack of direction, whether that's a lack of shot calls, whether that's a lack of comms, I'm not too sure. But that's definitely where to start. Early pressure is going to be key if they want to try and translate any sort of late game pressure as well.
Well, as we start rolling through a few of these early bans, Hades and Yamoja from the Gladiators, Camelot Kings remove Olderun from the equation, and Ares as well. As the same first 2 bans for both these teams that we saw in game number 2. Athena followed for the Gilded Gladiators as a 3rd ban, and the Camelot Kings went with Amaterasu. We'll see if it stays the same or if we see the Gilded Gladiators maybe swap up their ban. Could maybe even potentially take that Athena as a first pick. It's worked out really well for a lot of the players who have been able to get their hands on it. Such a great initiator, and I think you put it best. It's just a very simple style of God. It doesn't take much to learn how to play Athena and to execute Athena. It's, do I have dash taunt? Yes. Do I have somebody next to me? Also, yes. We're going to press dash, press taunt, either get beads or potentially get a kill.
And then you can just do it again, right? So I think that would definitely be something the Gilded Gladiators are looking towards. They've prioritized this Chernobog a few times, and it didn't look terrible last game. It's just not enough, right? It's not that extra factor that really is needed here for the Glad. So they thought long and hard about this one, and they said Jarcorrr is not getting that Freya again. So that Freya will be taken away from the Camelot Kings. And I don't think the Camelot Kings are too pressed about the Chernobog as far as I'm concerned. I think the Athena would be a smarter ban in this slot. However, maybe they're trying to get something different, right? Maybe they're trying to set up a different strategy here. That's not like the draft that we just saw from the Camelot Kings. Is that similar to what they played in game number 1, right? They are showing some very different styles of play here based on what the Gilded Gladiators are prioritizing. So I still think it should be Athena, but doesn't necessarily mean that's where the Camelot Kings heads at for this last ban.
So what do the Camelot Kings want to ban here for their third slot? Ton of options still available. Amaterasu will be what they decide to go with at the end of it. So now, what is the priority for the Gilded Gladiators? It has been Chernobog and Chernobog for games 1 and 2. So they have not strayed away from their first pick. And they're not going to change it here. We're now moving into 3 games in a row that this Chernobog has been first pick. Game number 2, Stuart goes 5-2-2. Game 1 goes 5-4-5. So he's getting kills on this pick. But is that enough to warrant taking it as a first pick, or do you think that this is maybe too strong of a god to give over to the Camelot Kings?
I mean, you definitely are not giving it to the Camelot Kings, that's for sure. So I think definitely a smart look just to grab it in that slot. However, it's what are you giving up? In the previous iterations of this matchup, you were giving up Ares and Freya, and then you were also giving up Ganesh and Freya. Now, the Freya's gone, the Ares is gone. It looks like you're giving up the Rama, which is, something Stu could have played, but more specifically, this pick right here, the Athena, is what you're giving up. And are you valuing the Chernobog more than the Athena? I would say most teams are probably saying Cherno better, but given how the Camelot Kings have been picking apart the map and late game, their initiation has been so solid with, honestly, harder gods to execute on, giving Quig something like the Athena just seems kind of gross.
I wouldn't want to play against it.
Nope.
I feel sorry that I'm about to have to watch it potentially just unfold here.
Well, you don't have to. You can close your eyes and plug your ears, and I'll tell you what happens.
I could just go take a little nap and then ask you what happened at the end, but that would be a disservice to everybody out there.
I like this, though.
Fully paying attention, but giving Kyrmi something that can get fairly aggressive and taking a Ganesh for yourself, Gilded Gladiators make the adjustments on the fly. This Ganesh has been one of the top picks for a majority of this year, especially once we started getting from the Masters era and moving forward. So I like this adaptation from the Gladiators to get this powerful support pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good switch up. The Ganesh into Athena has been a pretty decent mashup. You can certainly, silence that dash taunt immediately and say, hey, you're gonna have to wait before you get unsilenced before you can actually go for the taunt, and usually the team can run away, as well as drop the Dharmic Pillars behind the Athena and say, hey, I'm not going to silence this taunt, but I'm going to make sure that your team can't follow up on it, right? So I think that's a good look. Throw a Susano into the mix. Sure, there's going to be a Morrigan. That can also be a Susano, which is a bit hard to deal with. But still, if you've got any sort of tick damage on the Morrigan, you're going to be able to track down that invis. You can follow her pretty easily with Typhoon. Pretty hard to miss that one. To try and chase her down. So the Gilded Gladiators certainly have options. The issue, of course, is now that the Camelot Kings lock in the Morrigan, they also have that Chernobog ultimate for themselves, which is a bit of an issue.
Second wave of bans, Camelot Kings take Raijin off immediately. Not going to give that one over to Snoopy. That's been one of his go-to mages outside of the Huang. We'll have to see if we still do end up seeing the Huang for the Gladiators, especially now with the Morgan Le Fay ban alongside that. And the Gilded Gladiators will put some respect to CaptainTwig's name now after a, again, 14-1 Lancelot game. The Gilded Gladiators are not going to let him have that one a second time, not let him attempt to repeat that performance, while also at the same time taking Daji away. While maybe not a CaptainTwig staple, has been rising up ever since her buff come this patch.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the Camelot Kings had an option of trying to grab that lance first if Twig really wanted to play it. But because the Chernobog's in play and because the Athena's in play, you gotta think the Morrigan would have been something that was on the radar of the Gilded Gladiators there for that second stage of bans. And of course, Twig has more options, right? He doesn't just have to play the lance. So I don't hate the way the Camelot Kings played this one. They still have a disgusting top 4 as well as that initiation. They can hold Variety's pick till the end, or put Variety on the Camazotz if he really wants to play it, right? That is still certainly an option. The Gilded Gladiators, assuming that, once again, Stuart takes that Chernobog, have to reveal the Snoopy pick here. I was going to say something like Merlin is available, but Merlin has been available every single game, and Snoopy has went towards the Huang or the set. I don't think we're going to see the run back of the set after last game. I would like to see the Merlin or even an Agni. It will be the Merlin. Snoopy said, you know what? I'm done with the Huang. Give me something that's easier to execute on. Plenty of AoE damage, plenty of defense. And of course, Cerberus makes it all the way through. And Variety likes to play that one as well.
Variety said, nah, this one worked out pretty well in game number 1. Why don't I just run it back? Maybe never mind. We'll hold our thoughts until the Cerberus actually gets locked in or something else gets slotted in its place. So instead, we will just talk about what the Gilded Gladiators do have for themselves. You have some global presence now with the Chernobog. You can, again, try and take an unfair fight, I guess, for the enemy team by rotating them over. You got a highly mobile jungler in the Susano, and then you got a really powerful front line in the Ganesha and Hercules, or you can always have the Ganesha kind of sit in the back and maybe try and protect one of these carries like the Merlin, who's going to just be pumping out range damage. Is there enough pieces here now for the Gladiators? Is there enough early game safety with this team so that way they can't get rolled over even with the Sun Wukong now picked up?
I would say they definitely have some early aggression here. Susano is going to be a great look into just about any lane at the moment. There's not too much he's afraid of. You also have the Ganesha that can bridge that gap super well with the Dharmic Pillars if you want to get active early or if you're just using it as a defensive tool. But the Merlin and the Chernobog are going to play till late, right? They are definitely leaning more towards 6 items if they can help it. That's just where they come online so hard with the late game hyper carry nature of both of those characters. So it seems to me like the Gilded Gladiators are going to play this one a little bit slower and try and focus on team fights. It's not going to be easy because, again, you've got the Morrigan and the Athena that can just pick you apart from across the map, which they have to watch out for. But as long as the Gilded Gladiators aren't getting over-aggressive, right? If they're not over-committing in lane, if they're not forgetting that there's this much global presence available, then I think they should be able to get to that 20-minute mark without being too far down.
I think one of the discussion points we've had whenever it comes to usually dealing with global ultimates is to kind of play where the globals are so they can't utilize that. So for the Gladiators and for Kyrmi, it is trying to play through your duo lane, get Stuart a little bit further ahead, make sure that you can also get some setups there for Awesome Jake. It is trying to get ganks in this duo lane to shut down Jarcorrr and try and keep Quig at bay. Do you think that's the best solution here for Kyrmi, or do you think that he should stick to maybe one of these other lanes?
Well, Rama is certainly gankable. I'm not going to say that it's easy because that ultimate can sometimes make things more difficult, and if he goes up to the sky, Quig's on the way, right? He's going to ult over and say, don't worry, I got you, I can peel for you, etc. But yeah, trying to make sure Jarcorrr gets off to a bad start is ideal, I would say. If you can find 1v1s in the jungle, you know, if Kyrmi's able to take a 1v1 with CaptainTwig at, say, his back camps or like a blue buff invade or something, that's also not bad. I think Susano's got a pretty good matchup into Camazotz as long as you're able to juke at least one ability with your 3, right? If you can teleport underneath something of Camazotz, your 1v1 trade's not bad. If you get hit by everything, he's just going to ult your Typhoon and just win that 1v1 every time. So you got to be playing pretty on point, but you're already down 2-0. You're on the verge of getting 3-0'd. I would say for the Gilded Gladiators, it's time to try to force some plays, right? It's time to make something happen.
Yeah, because if they want to keep this set alive, well, they have to get a win here and then potentially another one and then another after that. Again, that's if they want to win the set. It has to be through a reverse sweep. Gladiators have been in a position like this before. Dial back to the Dragon set that they had in the week prior. We're in this exact spot. Down 2-0, need to win game 3. They do so after, I think, nearly 40 minutes of play. Then have a dominant game 4, and then a back and forth game 5 at the very end. So they are certainly capable, but the Gilded Gladiators have got to pull out all the stops here in game number 3. Can they do so, or will this be a sweep for the Camelot Kings? Let's throw it to Gormizer and inbound.
Thanks so much, J-Mac and Charlie. We'll find out if it is going to be, I guess, one of those 2 things he highlighted there as we jump into the game. It's Gortz inbound. It's Doug. Now, will the Gladiators give us a 4-game set, or at least a 4-game set, depending on how this game goes? Chat doesn't seem to think so. We bounced a little bit. We were, what, 88-12? Then it was like in the 70s. Now we're back in the 80s. Chat's not feeling confident. I did see Billy say that he was all in on the Gladiators. I can't remember the hashtags he used. So I know at least some of that is Billy trying to give them as much support as possible here. So I'll ask you, how are you feeling? You agreeing with chat? Is it 81 to 19 on the other side? Like, accurate?
I think from what we've seen so far, the Gladiators have been playing the mid-game and the late-game portions pretty poorly. I think their early games have been great, and you highlighted this where even back to when I was on this team, we'd play good early games, and then we get to those mid games, those late games, and we would kind of collapse. If they can play that early game portion all the way through for a full game, I'm down. This is a great Gladiators comp. They actually have a lot of just different ways to play. They can play front to back. If they have a lead on somebody, they can play dive. Stu can play to rotate a lot. But again, it kind of comes down to, are the Gladiators going to be able to do that? This Kings comp on the other side is also going to be very strong, and they're both going to be, well, the Kings especially should be a lot more scrappy than the Glads. The Glads don't want to get up in that scrappy type of fights, and I think that is going to be kind of telling in that pre-10-minute phase. Scrappy fights are going to be usually in favor of the Kings. Or sorry.
Scrappy fights.
Scrappy fights, yes, are in favor of the Kings.
Yeah.
I did say it right. I don't know why I thought for a second that I did.
You said sorry, and I'm like, okay, scrappy fights. Like, let's let it there. Who's scrapping, and who's winning them in favor of the Kings? Maybe that's what we'll get to see. In fact, for a decent portion of this, we might see a couple of those scraps. Ganesh was a huge conversation point last game. So the question for Jake is maybe can he do anything here? The question for Kyrmi is can you stay alive? Twig's chasing him down. Good juke, but the leap is better. Tingz is the one who picks up the credit for first blood here. A minute and a half in, Kyrmi falls.
Yeah, and now you're going to have a Morrigan running around making plays all over the map. That is not the best thing to happen if you're a Glads fan. A slow start now is going to be even slower for them. Kyrmi goes down for first blood. Big man picks up that first kill. And when you think about gods that you wouldn't want to get first bloods, for mages at least, I think Morrigan's got to be up there. The movement she provides, the utility, her being ahead means more ultimates. It is very scary, especially somebody like Big Man getting that first kill.
And being able to put the assist over onto Twig as well, like, we saw who won that fight, right? Big Man was on the side, but it was Twig's damage. And so we'll have to keep our eyes out for any 1v1s, and maybe Kyrmi needs to keep his eyes out for any 1v1s as things go awry, especially when Bat Out of Hell gets into the equation. Things can get a little wonky. And as you said, maybe scrappy, but in favor of the Kings. Cxnnahh pushes forward. Variety and Twig are here, but it's going to be the 2v2. Kyrmi rotates in, gets some damage onto Variety, helps spread this out. Twig, unable to focus one or the other, makes sure that this actually ends up being a damage trade in favor of the Gladiators, even if no kills are there just yet. Twig and Kyrmi both still hanging around and lingering on right. And it seems like the cooldown buff is going to be the big thing of contention here, and that's going over to the Kings.
And maybe slight advantage for the Gladiators. Tier 1 breastplate on Cxnnahh as opposed to the Tier 1 Soul Eater for Variety. But Kyrmi waiting around the wall. Variety is 5 here. Twig did just use his ult, or his jump to get over that wall, and Kyrmi out of mana. A little bit of poke. Nothing too scary for the Kings. Both solo jungle hitting level 5. Cxnnahh also hitting level 5. Kyrmi still level 4. Part of it comes down to that early first death. Duo lane looking for their shield camp. 50-50 happens, and Jake actually taking a little bit of damage, picks up the shield camp.
But might lose his life for the trade. Athena even coming in, and by Athena, I mean Tingz is going to make sure that the dunk is there. That's the double global that we might see throughout this game. And a clean rotation from the Morrigan to make sure that Jake goes down, and a second kill on board for the Kings.
And that's that. I mean, it's not because of that first blood, but this is just something that's going to make this Morrigan ramp up a lot faster now. Tier 2 Doomorb is done. She's able to ult over to left, get another kill now. She's 2-0 at 4 minutes. And this is going to be a very, very quick Doomorb. She's backing now, coming out of base with maybe the Doomorb already. Doomorb's already finished on the Morrigan. 4 minutes and 14 seconds.
Now, I'm checking my math. That's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's very quick.
As it turns out, Athena comes in, Cxnnahh in trouble, taunted in, dunk down from Variety. All you need is a little more damage. Slow is good. You have the cudgel, and you do. Dunk down onto Cxnnahh, and it is another kill for the Kings. This one at least unaffected by BigManTingz, but it does give an assist over to Quig as well as the kill onto Variety. And Jarcorrr, while under pressure, is going to be just fine on left. The Kings seem to be running the map in every lane they choose.
And we've got almost a 2,000 gold lead at 5 minutes. Twig walking in, bullying out Snoopy, bullying out Kyrmi a little bit. Kyrmi still in level 5. and Quig, the support, is level 6, up a level on the enemy jungle. And that is never a good feeling as a jungler. You want to be able to kind of, throw your weight around, bully a little bit, kind of like solo laners do. And when you walk up to the enemy support and he's got a level on you and he's got all that defense, he's going to be out-trading you pretty easily.
Well, now neutral farm. I mean, it's always weird when you get into conversations like this. At least mid-camps you can maybe still contest if you're the Gladiators. And, there are years where if you were down 3-0, even thinking about the mid-camps would probably result in another death. And we've seen that danger. I mean, Quig was helping facilitate kills around the mid-camps last game. But at least you get something. If you're losing the shield buff and the cooldown buff, you need to find those small victories in between. The Kings, 1,500, almost actually 2,000 gold. It seems like it's hovering actually right on the edge there. Yeah, 2,000. And so they've got the lead. 6 minutes in, 2,000 is a lot to be able to control. But it's slowed down. We haven't seen as much from Twig. We haven't seen as much overall. Of course, I say
Connor
that,
just dashed.
Now we see Variety with a great ult from Quig. Comes down, taunt good, slow down, body blocks are there. Can take a couple shots, but the taunt comes in, the dunk is down, the autos are good. And all of that was a long-winded, fancy way to say Variety gets a kill on Cxnnahh.
And Cxnnah's now gone down twice for not something that usually gets you punished. Dashing in solo lane with nobody else on your side of the map. Unfortunately, you can't do that when there's a global. Jake playing up a little bit right now. Gets his dash off, a lot of damage onto him.
Yach's ult, I don't know that they care on the other side. It's just going to be damage. Tingz transforms into the Camazotz, bat out of hell to continue the chase. Jarcorrr even gets a piece of it. And gets the last piece at that. The kill goes over to the carry. And it is 5-0, 7 minutes in. And I'm starting to think that 19% is feeling a little frail at this point. They're small victories. Cooldown buff goes over to Cxnnahh. And the gold, well, starting to spiral out of control, is still in a conceivably manageable spot. You just need to stop getting caught out, and flickers away from taunts are small but effective ways to make sure that that stays the same.
And I guess a small bright side for the Glads is both mid and ADC are still 0-0 and 0, so they're still farming up rather effectively. They're going to be soaking up waves under tower. Maybe a slight XP lead on the side of the Kings in those two roles, but looking at Twig here, does still have ult. Shouldn't be in too big of a worry. A lot of stuff is actually used just for Twig to ult out. Chernobog ult, Susano ult, all just for Twig's ult.
And while that, first off, if I'm, again, maybe balancing some scales here, the checkbook says that spending Twig's ult for his life, but getting Stu and Kyrmi's ult is pretty good on the other side. But really, it's that interesting thing, and I'm wondering, and this is a lot of conjecture based on some of the comms earlier, but because we saw Tingz use the Kama ult, I'm wondering if they thought that Twig maybe was a little more open, maybe it got miscommunicated somewhere in there, and then Twig still had ult and was able to just kind of walk away. And so, because that's a really heavy investment for somebody who you haven't seen ult otherwise.
That's an interesting point, and that's something that you usually don't think about, where when Morrigan is in the game and she is ulting into her own teammates, sometimes that might be miscommunicated. Shield buff goes in favor of the Glads again. But that is something that does get miscommunicated sometimes. That is a very good point. Maybe they thought it was Kama actually that did it, and Snoopy actually dashes right in front of Twig.
Yeah, that's going to be unfortunate for him. Now the Athena comes in. You might not even need the taunt, but it's there for good measure. Tingz closes it up. And it's keeping them on their toes. I think Tingz has been, what, 2, 3 different gods this game? Maybe, well, I guess 3 if you count the Morrigan, and the Athena, and the Kama. And so far it's been pretty clean and consistent. Now Twig, who has the ult again, is going to get Quig this time, actually using the Athena ult. Not going to have the engage they need. Instead, they're looking for the disengage. Pull out the Dharmic Pillars. But it's 6-0. We're approaching 10 minutes in, and it's 4,000, well, 3,500. Got to make sure we call it exactly where it's at. But all in favor of the Kings.
And it's almost like the Glads are scrambling at this point. Some of these fights that they're taking don't seem to be too positive. Jake drops ult there. Nothing really, like, there was no upside really to that fight. Kyrmi had no ult. Twig still had ult. Twig had ult. Quig had dash. I want to make sure I specify which one it was. They still had a lot of abilities up. And it's almost like they're just trying to find something. And Snoopy beads used right here, looking for the trade maybe?
And playing super aggressive, goes into the fire stance, tries to trade some damage out there, but Twig is more than happy to take it, goes into the bat out of hell, spreads the damage. Kyrmi and Snoopy get chunked by those swipes, but Twig has to fall back. Maybe the first engagement slightly in favor of the Gladiators, and it might not even be that. Variety going around the back, has the Somersault Cloud, pushed up against the wall, is extraordinarily tanky with just the breastplate and the Soul Eater at this point. Going to keep him alive enough that nobody's even looking at him right now. I don't know if there's even going to be that much of a fight. Pushed into the tier 2, damage should be there, but again, Somersault Cloud exists. And he's Wukong, so Wukong does Wukong things, gets out. Instead, it's Stu who's going to be in a little bit of trouble up into the sky, and a teleport from Kana going to come through on the left. Now the engage gets a little more interesting. Ting's in trouble, and that's a big shutdown. A killing spree was what Ting's was on. And now it gets back to the grayscale. Variety pulled back in, and the Gladiators finally find some positives. It's not just the one-off onto Tings. They get Twig and Variety too, and the Gold Fury left wide open for them. They're going to immediately step up, and a turnaround necessary at the 11-minute mark. But can they hold on to this? Jarcorrr steps forward and has the ult, has the autos, burns down Jake, and has an Athena coming in into the sky. One snipe misses, 2 and 3. I don't even need them as Tings comes crashing down in the fight. They overstayed their welcome. The Kings resurge and look for a little more. Kyrmi goes in, but it's gonna cost him his life. Gets Jarcorrr. Wow. And so some massive math. Someone's been counting the kills, surely. Since it was a goose egg, 5 for the Gladiators. And only 3, I believe, picked up there by the Kings. What a wild, wild, wild fight.
Starts out with a huge advantage for the Glads. It was almost a little disrespectful what the Kings were doing there, using so many ults, not having as many abilities up there, and playing super in the jungle. Twig does have ult, looks for the ult trade by Jake there. But just so deep by the Kings with very few abilities up, and the Gladiator said, this is enough, we got to take this fight right now. What they're doing right now, they can knock it away with. They get the 3 quick kills. They end with a 2-for-3 trade at the back end. But just getting the shutdown kill onto Tings is a really good play by the Glads.
Yeah, and it keeps them into a spot. Well, admittedly, it doesn't necessarily move the goalposts forward or backward, right? It keeps them right where they're at. You're still about 3,000 gold down. Actually, you've chunked it to maybe around that 2,000 mark. So you've done a positive gain there. And you put kills on the board, which is something that you were missing in spades. And more importantly, I think getting that kill onto Tings was huge. Still a 2-level lead in mid, but stopping this Morrigan, it seems to be almost essential considering how versatile Tings has been. Kyrmi gonna get taunted in, uses the beads, is going for Jarcorrr, who's up in the sky. Gonna throw some snipes down, throws them mostly onto Stuart. Not a lot of damage spread out there, and they're gonna be able to get out. But Twig comes in to help try and clean this up and has a lot of damage for Kyrmi. Now you've got Tings, or I should say Quig. They've got me confused here, all tongue-tied with how often they've been alternating. But Quig, who goes in, now it's a taunt onto Jake, and they've got Force surrounding him. Should be a quick burn onto the support for the Gladiators. Kana's going to be coming in a little bit late. Tings almost has ult back. That could be a big change maker for him, forced into the Camazotz. And he's going to retreat here. Because again, the Kings play aggressive. Kyrmi able to come back into this fight and stay alive, but he's losing so much health so quickly. Oh my god, the Kings just delete the jungler, and now they're going to turn that on to the mid laner and the solo as well. Kana and Snoopy taken out, and it's a 4-man swing in favor of the Kings.
And the Kings throwing their weight around right now. They have that big gold lead, 4,000 gold. Gold Fury is up. The Gladiators slightly on the back foot, looking for a little bit of an opening. Kings have really nice rotations coming through. They take that fight. Look for Jake at the beginning and then take the fight after. Also, I mean, right now, Variety 5-1-1. Twig, although he doesn't have a kill, 0-1-7. He's been a part of a lot of the kills. And this Athena, I think, 2-1-8. We've been seeing a lot of Athena recently, and it's no surprise why. The amount of potential around the map she always brings and the easy engage she brings. And Quig is no surprise, making it look fantastic.
I mean, at this point, it just feels like everything the Kings do has some positive light on it, except for the time that they were just so overextended. Like you said, maybe I think the word disrespectful was a little bit on there and on the nose, but it is exactly what it was, right? They're deep in like next to the red buff, the green buff. Variety got pushed into the tier 2 tower at one point, and It does end up coming at that point in favor of the Gladiators, but since then and before that, it has been Kings, Kings, Kings. 8 kills separating them, 13-5, and it's 15 minutes in.
And just something that's interested me just from the games today, there's been so much breastplate bought. The buff was a nice buff, yes. We have 4 breastplates in this game, both solos, both supports. 10 MP5 and only 50 gold off has just made this item just a must-buy. On top of the glyphs also getting bought, which I think is like the biggest portion of it. That I don't know the name of the glyph, but the golden breastplate gives so many protection, so much movement speed. And then the blue one with the anti-auto attack on your ultimates is also a really good just utility way to use this breastplate also.
Honestly, and I'm a big fan of any, like, anti-auto attack is one of those, at least like counters in Smite. It feels like that can be easily looked over, but then when you start like factoring it in, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this is like really good into certain comps. Right now, what's really good into a Hercules? Well, it's actually going to be a miss taunt, but it's not going to miss out on the damage. Kanna's staying alive doing Herc things.
A lot of jukes.
But it is a tier 1 tower that you're dancing under. That one's not going to do enough damage to turn this around and buy some time, but falls nonetheless. 6 kills for Variety, 4 for Tings, 2 and 2 for Quig and Jarcorrr. Twig doing the opposite of what he was doing. Last time around, he's, what, 13, 14, 15 kills? Now he's got a goose egg there, but he has facilitated 8 of these 14 from the jungle. And the Gladiators, outside of the earlier turnaround when they're deep in the tier 2, haven't had much to respond.
Yeah, the Glads have been on the back foot for a lot of this game, and I think other than that one opening they had, it's been all Kings. At this point, with how much gold you are behind, you are bleeding out 6,000 gold at 16 minutes. This is a massive, massive gold lead. And then you look at the XP lead, also 8K in favor of the Kings.
That's a lot.
This is a rare sighting in SPL for a game to kind of be this different. Kyrmi looking for a little bit of trade. Actually, good opening for the Glads, but unfortunately, that Athena ult just comes in and they just can't make plays around the map. It is so hard.
And what's been frustrating for them is that in the right times, there's been 2, right? Quig's got his ult down, but you still can't count on there not being an Athena ult because Tings is going to have his ult in just a few seconds. And your worst case scenario, maybe best case scenario, is you force Tings into the Camazotz, which has so far been able to slow some things down, but then you've got a level 16 Camazotz clone that's running around, right? And suddenly, it's maybe not as big of a silver lining as you would have thought. We're just lucky, and maybe it's just because of the essence of it, but I'm waiting to see him if he turns into like Jarcorrr just to get some snipes or try to make a montage play, something like that. It feels like he's got everybody else under the belt so far.
Yeah, I was hoping that he'd get like the achievement of one transform into everyone in this lobby, get a kill maybe with everyone or an assist or something like that. That'd be a cool achievement to have for Morrigan.
Get a kill or assist as every other god in the lobby.
That would be sick.
I wonder if I don't know how the achievements work or track that. I also don't know how any of the Morrigan stuff tracks, but that would be really cool if it is possible. At some poor dev who's pulling their hair out hearing us say that. Always fun, at least in my mind, to see what Tings has been able to do so far. And that is, I mean, like you said, we're not seeing a transformation. Like, I'm going to throw Ganesha out there just because Ganesha is always incredibly useful, but not into the Susano or the Hercules. Maybe something like that's going to be coming up here soon. Gold Fury started by the Gladiators. It's going to be a taunt from Quig, but it's the Gladiators who get the Fury. The fight afterward might be a different conversation because Tings is here and transformed, ready for a taunt, pulls in on Jake, gets the kill there. Snoopy absolutely taken down by Twig, and the chase continues with 2 already gone. Kyrmi pulls in, and they get a massive kill. That is huge to take out Twig and slow down the Kings. They pick up finally 1 more after losing 2, and like you said, you get the Gold Fury as well. It might be favorable technically for the Gladiators.
Yeah, for sure favorable, especially when you're one of your 2 deaths, Kyrmi and Jarcorrr, actually looking for this 1v1. Athena ult is coming down. Also, the Chernobog coming in. This is a 2v2 now. Kyrmi beats forced. Stu beats also forced. A little in favor of the Kings right now. Jarcorrr putting a lot of damage out. Aegis on Stu. Kyrmi is forced to go back in. Also taken down. Stu running away, but right in front of him. Variety on the Sun Wukong picks him up. 2 for 1 trade, or 2 for 0 trade over there. Twig was dead from a prior fight. 18-6 in favor of the Kings. Variety still has ult. Shouldn't be... I guess he should have been a little worried. That was a little close, I guess.
Too close for comfort. Extended trade, that's 4 for 1. Suddenly, we're maybe not having the conversation of worthwhile anymore. Going in on Jarcorrr, I endorse. The minute the Athena shows up, though, that conversation changed. And I was going to say they should feel happy and lucky that Jarcorrr didn't have his ult. But it didn't matter, because Variety was waiting there anyway. And so Snoopy, Jake for Twig, and then Kyrmi, Stu for no one. And it just shows the King's dominance.
And you think about a lot of what this Chernobog has done through this first couple weeks of the phase. It's been very rotation prio heavy. And then we saw this little counter come out where it's Morrigan. And Morrigan's coming out to transform into the Chernobog to then match the rotation. But the King's taking it even a step farther and say, we're going to have an Athena on top of that. So if you ever want to use your Chernobog ult, we're going to have 2 people following you, or at least 1 at all times. It's making it very hard for Stu to get really things done on this Chernobog. Even with that 2-1-3 stat line, 2 of those kills happened in the first 6 minutes. It was that first fight around the enemy green buff where they got a few kills. Other than that, Stu's not been able to get much done with this Bog.
We haven't gotten to see transformations that have made as big of an impact because Tingz can just match it most of the time. Quig can match it half the time. And so no matter what, it feels like the Kings have never found themselves at a numbers disadvantage, which is half of the benefit that the Chernobog can bring to you. Instead, 4-1 and 8, now level 20 for 3 members of the Kings. I mean, you had mentioned it, or I just pointed it out. We haven't touched on the gold in a while. But we're 9,000 separating them.
13,000 XP.
Yeah, that's
I guess they have a few level 20s, so.
Yeah. So at this point, at least it's capped off somewhere. You're going to catch up eventually. But you got to do something. Kana, Boulder, I think in an attempt to steal, but no vision from the Gladiators, gives us the information that it was way too early. Tier 2 on left, taken by the Gladiators. So they're trying to fight back some of this gold deficit. But they lose the Fire Giant, and it's on 5 of the Kings. 22 minutes. So mark the timer. 3 Tier 2s are all that's standing for the Gladiators. All the Tier 1s knocked away. So it is up to the Kings to figure out the rest here. Beads burned by Kana. Jake, Stu, starting to rotate over. Quig, Variety, and Jarcorrr are the 3 that they're jumping into. But here comes Twig, making it a 4v5. They don't have Kings until now. Oh my god, the damage out of nowhere from the Kings. They just jump in, and they're ready to get the job done. Variety even chasing down Kyrmi into the Phoenix, and they're going to find Stuart in the process. They take the Tier 2 and turn it quickly into an even fight. And even at this state, the Kings have the steering wheel, and they are driving this game exactly where they want it.
And that's exactly what it is. These are fights that the Kings know they're going to be winning, and it's almost baiting the Gladiators to be like, look at how out of position we are. Take this fight. You have the big Ganesha ult right here. And at the end of the day, the Kings aren't losing anyone. They're really not at risk of losing anyone in these fights. Also, the Glads, on the other hand, Beads Aegis forced on Stu, and he goes down. Beads forced on Kyrmi. Beads forced on Kana. A lot of relics down now for that side. And when you're behind like this, you're behind 12,000 gold, those relics mean a whole lot more than when you're sitting on the King side, up 11,000 gold. I mean, we'll bring up the 18,000 XP, even though there's a few level 20s. That is a lot of XP.
Yeah. At this point, I mean, a lot of that actually you're going to see in support. Jake, 16. As Quig, I wouldn't be surprised if that takes over to 20 soon just to join the rest of the team. With the amount of lead they have, you have to think so. They don't have their Phoenixes pulled out just yet, so maybe small wins for the Gladiators in that regard. But Tier 2, at least that one on left, I can't anticipate ever trying to defend it. So a Fire Giant, if we're looking at these Phoenixes, and you've got Titan in mid, where do you think the Kings go from here?
The Kings should look to just go left and middle at the same time. You have such a big lead with these globals. I would have preferred, actually, this is the correct play, having Variety go down left because the middle lane is going to be where the Phoenix or the Titan is spawning. So I think how the Kings are setting this up is perfect. Looking at it from the Gilded Gladiator side, you're not able to defend anything that isn't a Phoenix right now. And even those Phoenixes are so risky to sit under because you are so far behind. The Kings are able to dive very easily. The one bright side, if it can be called a bright side for the Glads, they have a Merlin who is very easily one of the best base defenders you can have because of how consistent his clear comes up and how often he has it compared to something like an Opwash, a Zeus. Just a little different in terms of he has just a lot more area damage. Consistently, they have just one big, giant field of damage.
And like you said, up often, right?
Yep.
If you're a Zeus or an Opwash, it's great, but you're tied to your ult, right? You better use it right because you only get the one shot for most of them. Merlin, throw out some void damage. Oh, that didn't work. Here's some ice damage. Oh, that didn't work. Well, you have to do wait a second there. And then fire damage. But do you even have the opportunity because the Kings jump into the Phoenix immediately? It's going to be Shred split between the players and the bird, but they're at least going to find one of each. Left side Phoenix goes down, and so does Snoopy. And the Titan helped push up in mid, gets mid Phoenix to about half health, and that should be, or could be, at least where the Kings end up going. Variety tanks it up. Jarcorrr torn between trying to take that bird down or maybe the fight. 30 seconds without Snoopy. The Kings backing up a little bit, giving a little leeway over to the Gladiators.
Trying to get that mid-wave here. Really good play by Kyrmi, forcing out Big Man's ult before the fight. Gives them an opportunity here. Snoopy's still done, though. This is a 4v5, and this Phoenix is already under half.
Tings appropriately trying to heal up. Phoenix gets deleted. Taunt is good. And the Relics, it's a graveyard for the Gladiators after that engage from the Kings. They might not come out with a kill, but they come out with a forceful fight and showcase that the Gladiators, at least for the next, I'm going to say 110 is what I see on a majority of those timers, just will not be able to fight the way that they want to.
And FG just falls off the waist of the Kings.
That's
FG,
a good fire giant.
That was like perfect timing. Everything about that was swell. Now they get their backs off. They don't even need to worry about warding too much at this point because of how far ahead they are. FG is going to be spawning. Left is going to be pushed out by the Glads. And this is a difficult spot to be put in because you are 18,000 gold behind, 2 Phoenixes down. How are you able to even match something like this if you try to push down left? They've got a double global, so it's not even in your favor.
Now, something, look, we had a 65-minute game yesterday, so, you know, talking about power potions and things like that, like late game stuff, is not necessarily, like, unheard of this week. That being said, for 27 minutes in, I just saw 4 red pot spot, and they might even get used right here. Snipes, you gotta see him, you gotta ring true, but the shots don't connect. Twig helps clean up Jarcorr's mess, kill off Kyrmi, kills off Stuart with Tings, and now you've got a Fury that's spawning in. Fire Giant's back up, but do you even need it with 2 of these kills?
Variety's bullying out in mid too.
You've got the zone, you've got the numbers, and you might just have this set. Kings marching down mid into the Phoenix line. Blink forward, taunt on to Kana, and the burn is there. Hercules, say goodbye, and so do the Gladiators as the Kings march it in and take this set.
And just like that, few more hits onto the Titan, putting a little bit of damage onto Snoopy, poking him down a little bit, just getting that damage number up a little bit. 3-0 for the Kings, and a final third game to end it with dominance.
I was expecting, I think we had it queued up as well, like for a Fire Giant fight with like a listen in. Let's try to go to the Kings, see what they were doing. They didn't even give us the opportunity. They just run down left, win the fight. And sometimes it happens. You pick off 2. And if you're looking at it, you know, there's probably a lot for the Gladiators to learn from this set and to move forward with. But if you're looking at the Kings, what I get out of this is they look really good with Quig. They play really well. They have wide god pools, and it turns out that they're still the Kings, and that's what we needed to see.
They may have had that little stage where they didn't look as strong, but this past 2 weeks, they've had the 2 sets. They've looked fantastic. They destroyed the Ravens, and then here, played fantastic against the Glads. Now we have to see them against the Ferrymen, Warriors, all those top teams. Those are going to be very exciting teams to see them play against, but great sets that we've seen from the Kings so far, and a great set right here.
And a very good, at least from what we've seen so far. Again, it's not necessarily as telling, because like you said, there's still a long phase ahead of them. But they ended the last phase on a pretty poor streak. I think 5 losses in a row before we got to see them pick one up, and then it was even more losses after that before we got here and that roster change happened. Now they're in an interesting spot, and they win this set 3-0. They're kicking things off well this phase. We'll see how long it continues, but that does it from myself. And inbound, throw it over to the desk, and they can give you the numbers.
And the Camelot Kings make it look easy in 3-0 fashion up against the Gilded Gladiators here in game number 3, Trelly. I think this one boils down to a Morrigan Athena just absolutely running rampant on this map. While CaptainTwig may have had a breakout performance in game 2 and had to kind of sit back and let the rest of the team win out this one, it's hard to not talk about this global presence that BigManTingz had on this Athena. As soon as he hits that level 5, level 6 mark, Athena ults to the side before the actual Athena even has ultimate available to him. This one is just, you cannot give a compo like this to the Camelot Kings.
I would say so, and it doesn't hurt that Variety is unkillable, has so much damage online as well. It just, you know, this is one of those matchups where the Gladiators have a lot to learn from, of course. You know, watching back, I think there's a lot that they could probably say, ooh, probably shouldn't have done this, probably shouldn't have done that, etc. But if you're the Camelot Kings, this is exciting stuff. Because honestly, if you're the Camelot Kings, this is a matchup you probably should have 3-0'd, right? But they looked clean doing so. They didn't drop any major objectives. I really do want to see this version of the Kings versus the other top teams in the league. As Bobby said, that should be very exciting because this was about as clean as SMITE as you can get, right? I mean, they played excellent early game. They threw a bit in, I believe, game number 2. But besides that, just dominance. And I love the drafting as well, which was always a big question mark for me about this roster was, you know, who is prioritizing, who are you trying to get picks for? I know that Tingz has been extremely consistent, but as far as CaptainTwig's God Pool and Variety's God Pool, I think came into question. But I had none of those questions in this set. Not one bit. Everyone pulled their weight.
Just watching that replay, like we were walking back in as that one happened, so I missed like, you know, the first part of that one. That was taunt, and then 90% of his health bar removed immediately afterwards. I mean, this was a Camelot Kings dominant game through and through. 9-1-4 for Variety, 5-1 for BigManTingz and Jarcorrr. Actually, a 5-1-12 for both of them. Not often you have the carries matching out there. And then a 2-1-18 here on the Athena for Quig. Everybody positive on the Camelot Kings, even CaptainTwig pulling up and picking up kills in those last couple of team fights there, bringing himself up into a 3-2-12. It's not the flashy 14-1 that he had in game 2, but it's exactly what he needed. Had the damage there, made those critical rotations, and allowed his side lanes to really get online. I mean, the first 10 minutes of the game, how many times did we look up and we see 3 people in Variety's lane diving Kana? It felt like it was countless at that point with these Athena and Morrigan rotations. But poor CaptainTwig had a great set himself here today, and fortunate for us, we get to talk to CaptainTwig. He's standing by for our post-game interview.
That's right, I got Twig here, and there's a lot of good that just happened in all 3 of those games, but I'm going to isolate the one where you had maybe the best KDA we've gotten to see this phase so far. Right, you come out, you do incredibly well on Lancelot. What do you attribute the success of that pick and that game to?
Usually whenever Big Man has a rough game, I get a lot more farm, you know? I get about 3 levels of farm early game. Whenever he has a bad game, I usually have a good one.
And then when he has a good game, you still went 3-2-12, so it's not like he had a bad game even still, but he had a great game in that third one. I'm kind of curious, though, you know, me and you were talking about it going into this, but like a kind of slow ramp up for the Kings after this win 3-0. You're now going into a kind of tougher portion of the phase and some tougher opponents, especially, I think you said Levi's and Warriors for next week. So what is the mentality like after getting a couple wins under the belt, but definitely looking forward?
We definitely had the training wheels on. Both weeks now, we've got to watch the other team play on Friday, get ready for it, like prepare, play them on Sunday and beat them 3-0. So we're 6-0 now, but I don't think that proves a thing. We've got really training wheels first 2 weeks. Next week, Levi's Warriors, I think it's time to show if we can do anything.
And now I think maybe the more important question, because it's not gameplay related. How's being a dad, dude?
The baby's still in ICU, so I don't feel like a dad yet. But yeah, I guess it's a step. It's a real change in life.
You get a world championship. You've got a kid. Things are changing. Looking good for Twig. And looking good for the Kings as well so far, right? 2-0 start, like you said, still some tough opponents on the way, but fun games to watch. So congratulations on your win, man, and thank you for your time. We'll get back to the desk, and they'll close out the day.
That's right, big wins now for the Camelot Kings to start out their phase 2-0, but as mentioned by CaptainTwig, maybe a bit of training wheels, and now getting ready for the big ramp-up matches for them next week. But that's all that we have for SPL for this week. Let's take a look at the schedule for everything that did happen here in week number 2 of the SPL. It all started back on Friday. Leviathans 3-1 the Hounds, and Ravens a 3-0 over the Gladiators. Then Saturday, Warriors and Leviathan square off, and that's another win for the Levi's in 3-1 fashion. Ravens get a 3-1 over the Jade Dragons. And then today, we started things with the Ferrymen and the Hounds. That went 3-1 Ferrymen. And then we rounded it all out with a 3-0 for the Camelot Kings to give them an undefeated streak so far. As we take a look at the standings, a 2-0 does put them up ahead of the Oni Warriors by nature of a higher win percentage for themselves, but having only played 2 games compared to a few other teams in the league who have 3 or even for some of them 4 matchups already does mean that the Camelot Kings still have a little bit more to go, and we'll have to see how they can fare against some of those other top teams, because as mentioned, Oni Warriors, Leviathans are a couple of their next matchups. We even take a look at Highland Ravens. They've got to play against the Styx Ferrymen, I believe, the next week, so still a lot of big matchups to be had, but with our first 2 weeks, you can take a look at those things there and see it is Leviathans and now Camelot Kings on top.
I'm glad that Twig's got that same mindset, right? 'Cause I think that's what we were all thinking. Of course, you can tell this is a more clinical version of the Camelot Kings. They're looking a lot cleaner. It's going to take some time for them to ramp up to that point, but this is a step in the right direction. But you got to prove yourself against that top team. So he's like, I'm not saying anything just yet. You know, we're going to ramp up to that point before I start, you know, saying for certain how good we are.
Yeah, got to be prepared for your next matchups, and we do have those next matchups. We can look at schedule for week number 3. Oni Warriors and Camelot Kings kick things off. That's a big match that you're not going to want to miss. Same with the Jade Dragons and the Styx Ferrymen for Friday. Saturday, Kings are back against the Leviathans, another big one for them, and then the Ravens and the Ferrymen return to close out Saturday. And then on Sunday, the Warriors once more against the Gladiators and the Jade Dragons and Eldritch Hounds. In all honesty, Trelly, I'm not sure which match I'm most excited for next week. I want to see more of this Camelot Kings, see how they can fare up against these other top teams, especially another team in their division in the Warriors, and then their one chance to play the Leviathans out of division. I think those are 2 matches I'm really looking forward to. But also this Highland Ravens and Styx Ferrymen. I think for me, Saturday might be my must-watch day of the weekend.
Well, that's the beauty of it, J-Mac. Number 1, I'm not going to ask you what your favorite set is or the one you're looking forward to most. And number 2, you get to just watch them all. As long as you're here on time, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of next week. That's what this schedule's for. Just make this, put it in your schedule, and you'll be there.
Well, the good thing is also is, you know, it's not like I kind of do have to be here. It's not, you know, if I wake up on time, it's I better wake up on time because I got to be here for a job. But also, I don't want to miss this SPL. So for everybody else, make sure that you set your alarms for the SPL next week kicking off on Friday. Make sure you stick around. We do have the SCC coming up immediately after this for our North American side. But that's all that we have for the SPL here in week number 2. On behalf of myself, Charlie, all the other casters, everyone behind the scenes, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the SPL next week.